It has been over 80 weeks, a time of much confusion and waiting. Very unusual and very challenging. But one thing was clear. We needed to adapt.
Direction, but they are going.
New generation.
The falling object, this is if we start at stage 3.
We tried to find new ways. We pushed our limits. We were frustrated. We were exhausted. We worked hard to stay the course through one of the most important events of recent history. And now, we begin again. Not quite as it was, but look around. Look hard. You'll find the metro we all missed. Our labs will keep chasing new discoveries. Our staff will work harder to keep the campus safe for us all. Clubs will come alive and welcome the newly curious. We will keep our commitments alive. More important than all, we will be together without pixels between us. This is important because what makes Metro great is not only its classes and classrooms, but its campus, where we can be with one another, experience one another, and learn from one another. Welcome home, Hojum.
Burası benim evim.
1956'da burada doğdum.
Çorak, geniş bozkırdan kendime bir ev, evimi bilim ormanı yaptım.
Pek çok adım var. Başarı,
Özgürlük,
Bilgi, cesaret.
Gelecek. 98 ülkeden 30 bin öğrencinin 2700 öğretim elemanının sesinde beni duyarsın.
130 bin mezunun gözlerinde beni görürsün.
Ben ODTÜ'yüm.
İlk günden beri araştırıyorum.
Geliştiriyorum.
Daha iyisini arıyorum. Üç kampüste 44 lisans,
112 yüksek lisans ve 69 doktora programım var.
...430 eğitim ve araştırma laboratuvarım, 43 araştırma merkezim var.
Biliyor musun? Ben hiç kep atmadım. Çünkü öğrenmenin hayat boyu devam ettiğine inanırım.
Öğrendiklerimi paylaşırım.
Geleceğimiz için sanayiyle işbirliği yaparım.
Türkiye'nin ilk teknokent hayalini de, teknokentini de ben kurdum.
Bugün 335 Ar-Ge firmasıyla birlikte araştırmalar yapıyorum.
Bir milyondan fazla kaynağa sahip kütüphanem var.
...156 öğrenci topluluğu ve 46 spor takımımla yılda 1000'in üzerinde etkinlik yapıyorum.
pek çok farklı sesim var. Hepsine kulak verir, hepsinden bir şeyler öğrenir.
Bu yüzden hocam kelimesini çok kullanırım.
İçim umut dolu, heyecanlıyım.
Çünkü dünyayı değiştirebilirim.
Ben ODTÜ'yüm. Seni de bekliyorum.
Hello and welcome to the celebration of 25th anniversary of the Graduate School of Informatics. For the opening speech, please join me in welcoming the Rector of Middle East Technical University, Professor Dr. Mustafa Verşankök.
Dear members of the Graduate School of Informatics and dear Middle East Technical University faculty members, students, and the distinguished guests. Well, this year makes the 25th anniversary of Graduate School of Informatics, and I'm delighted to be welcoming you all to this event to celebrate the successful years the graduate school has left behind and extend our wishes for many years ahead. The Graduate School of Informatics is one of the young graduate schools of our university. It's a thematic institute aiming to bring together academics and experts from different fields of information and the information technology to provide interdisciplinary training and research. The faculty members conduct research on a wide range of areas, including big data, artificial intelligence, cognitive modeling, software management, medical image analysis, neuroscience, bioinformatics, human and technical aspects of information systems, cyber systems, information security, as well as multimedia informatics. The faculty members aim to contribute to the growing labor needs of the industry and the public with their qualified students. The Graduate School of Informatics is a growing institution responding to all the challenges in the informatics field. When the school was established in 1996, it had the rights to offer 2 master programs, namely Information Systems and Cognitive Science, to which a total of 38 students were admitted. In time, the institute obtained rights of conferring more degrees. Well, today it offers a total of 12 master's and 5 doctoral degree programs. It has 394 master's and 169 doctoral students, amount to a total of 563 graduate students. The institute also hosts a number of research groups and laboratories, all of which are offering the graduate students an active research environment in collaboration with their professors. Dear guests, the talks that will start soon are all very exciting, and once again, on behalf of Middle East Technical University, I warmly welcome the distinguished invited speakers and all the participants. Congratulations to Graduate Schools of Informatics on this occasion, and many wishes for future success.
We would like to thank Professor Kök for his kind words and opening the program today. Now, please welcome the Director of Graduate School of Informatics, Professor Dr. Deniz Zeyrek Bozşahin.
Thank you, Kerem. Dear Professor Kök, distinguished guests, dear colleagues and students, I would like to welcome you all very warmly to our event. It gives me a great pleasure and a profound excitement to be welcoming you this afternoon. I am proud of the 25 successful years that the Graduate School of Informatics has left behind. Our graduate school started its journey in 1996 with the encouragement of our university, the bold vision of a beloved teacher, the late Professor Neşe Yalabık, and continued with the efforts of my predecessor, Professor Nazife Baykal. Since 1996, the graduate school has moved ahead, enlarging the number of its graduate programs and reforming the exciting ones many times. But it is still a young institute in a changing world. It aspires to keep up with the highly dynamic fields of informatics and information technologies, extending its research interests to the new fields associated with these domains of research. In fact, the speeches of our invited guests, which are to start soon, will give you a hint as to how our graduate school moves ahead. Something that hasn't changed in 25 years is that one of the key responsibilities of our graduate school is to provide a broad teaching and researching perspective to the graduate students accepted to our programs. A key goal of our graduate school is to promote the transformative nature of education. This involves a human-centered worldview and forms the essence of our educational, scientific, and application-oriented activities. Moving forward, we will be taking a broader perspective aligned with the changing world's needs, ultimately encouraging our graduates to become change makers in the post-pandemic world, defending scientific knowledge, and helping to disseminate scientific literacy. Being a part of a research university, our graduate school has always aimed at national and international, aimed at contributing to scientific and social development at the national and international levels. Our school seeks to influence the industry and the public and contribute to national IT policies by means of the innovative research projects of our faculty and through several generations of graduates who are fully aware of the bidirectional knowledge transfer between the academia and the industry. Dear guests, I'm looking forward to this afternoon. I do hope you enjoy our event, and we're very grateful to our speakers for taking time from their busy schedule to help us celebrate our 25th anniversary. In closing, I would like to thank everyone in the President's Office who have supported us, as well as my colleagues, the graduate school personnel, and our research assistants involved in the organization of this event.
Thank you for your inspiring speech, Professor Zeyrek Bozşahin. Our program will continue in a few minutes.
Thank you for joining us today. We're honored to see you here at our 25th anniversary celebration. And it's a pleasure to host you and meet you here on this occasion. I would like to say a few words about you before you begin your talk. So to introduce you to the audience. John Schwartz serves as edX Head of Global Business Development. He's part of the team that drives EDX's engagements and with prospects and partners, including foundations, NGOs, corporations, and governments for both local and international. John has extensive experience in Asia and Middle East. John's career has been focused on driving business development for companies in a variety of industries, including education technologies, automotive, pharmaceuticals, publishing, and finance. He has also experience in strategic marketing and branding with an emphasis on experiential design. Recently, John was a board member and chief strategist at Hudson & Cutler, a technology-driven marketing and communications company. He is a graduate of Hobart and William Smith Colleges. Thank you, John. And the title of John's talk will be The Future of Higher Education After the Pandemic, which is quite a relevant topic to the current situation of all the universities are facing. Thank you for joining us. So I'll pass on you for your talk. Thank you.
Thank you, and sorry everyone for being late. I don't think I've ever had this many problems trying to get on a Zoom call, but it said it was for participants only. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this will work. Can everybody see it? I'm just assuming you can. So before I start, first, thank you very much for having me. And Anand Argawal, our founder, sends his best as well, and he was hoping he could have been here. I just got back yesterday from Dubai, where evidently I said some controversial things. It was a conference on higher education from universities in the Gulf region. And it was a very interesting exchange of ideas. And I thought it would be really relevant to today to talk to you about some of the findings, that have been happening, in the world. The world, as we all know it, has changed so dramatically with the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, I spent a lot of time keynoting around the world about the value of online education and how online education could supplement and buttress the in-person brick and mortar curriculum that universities are offering. And I can tell you that it was very challenging, even with MIT and Harvard and other, top schools, to really get them on board, to make them understand that the true future of education and lifelong learning would have a digital component to it. So the pandemic, in less than 3 weeks, everybody went online. And universities around the world were scrambling to figure out how they were going to be able to continue teaching, how they were going to be able to turn their in-person content into MOOCs, or how they were going to teach online. So the whole learning higher education landscape has changed. So it's been remarkable to see how universities have been able to get by over the last year and survive and provide continuous learning and education to their students. Let me see if I can. So why are we leading this conversation, and why is it relevant to you? I mean, we're simply leading it because edX is a consortium of some of the best universities in the world. I think most of you know that edX was founded and funded by both Harvard and MIT. And over the last 12 years, we have had almost 160 of the top universities and colleges, as well as enterprises like Amazon and Google and IBM, providing content on the platform to 44 million learners. And so we're really trying to democratize and provide access to learners all over the world. And we feel very strongly, and I'm sure you as a leading technical university as well, feel strongly that you have to be part of this conversation. It's no longer an option to sit back and hope that things will continue in traditional fashion. One of the things I said in Dubai that caused a lot of controversy was the 4-year degree is still very important, but employers are now looking for students, graduates that have certain requisite skills so they are job ready on day one. And that gap between what graduates have and what enterprises need is growing due to technology. And that's why talking to you, who have a vast understanding, most of this you're probably already aware of and addressing. But the point I was making in Dubai was universities really have to be learner-centric and figure out how to make sure that their graduates are job ready and prepared, because I can tell you that enterprises and governments, while they value, and I want to be clear, while they value the graduate degree and undergraduate degree, there are many alternatives now. I'm sure most of you are aware, for example, that Google launched their own degree for, I think it's under $1,000. And again, it's a short program. I think it's 6 months, but it does give a person certain job-ready skills that make them viable in a Google-type atmosphere. So we are trying to be global advocates and work alongside universities like yours to make sure that your learners are prepared as they enter the world. Let's see. I guess it's just one of those days. Let me see if I can. So what happened during the pandemic, was really unprecedented. And it really fast forward important thinking for every university, which is you can survive in a hybrid world. And I think most of academia is now very accepting of the fact that brick and mortar is absolutely important, but the ability to provide flexibility on your campuses so students can learn in a variety of different ways, and also so you can carry your institution's learning to a much wider audience is going to happen in this hybrid world. And what we're advocating is, I think universities really risk being somewhat marginalized if they're not part of this global conversation and online offering. So during COVID, we obviously gave away millions of courses to any university in the world to help them supplement their in-person curriculum. So if you needed a course in Java development, we were able to give you that from one of the best institutions, so you didn't have to create it yourself because there was no time, and you could layer in these different subsets of courses to support your current curriculum. And what we're seeing now, even though we're coming out of the pandemic and in-person is starting again, is that many universities are choosing to partner with different institutions, the MITs, the Georgia Techs, again, to add additional content to their curriculums. And so the pandemic, as terrible as it was, it forced everybody to see the value of not only online learning, but recognize that universities did not have to continue to overtax their professors, and that there were other ways for them to have immediate access with very little resources spent and put a university on parity with their peers and other learning institutions. So again, what we're seeing and what student trends are kind of telling us is, the world as we see it now, 40% of bachelor seeking learners, don't complete their degrees. The good news is that almost 60% said that COVID's going to impact their decision to seek additional education, which is fantastic news. But I think the real proof point is the fact that 73% of students are totally on board with taking online courses, and this changed significantly. And by the way, it really is no different than what enterprise and government workers are saying about remote learning. As we're all reading, the Googles and Facebooks and Apples are now all talking about a hybrid work situation. Students are also understanding the value. But I want to be really clear. We are not advocating just online learning or in person. We are saying that there is a healthy use for both, and both are equally important. So what universities are telling us, and I think you're probably already aware of this, is that access. almost 90% of people like you are concerned about how you get your content, your school, all the things that you offer to lower income students around the world. And the real challenge, and I know a lot of you are faculty, or the majority are faculty on this call, because we work with 160 institutions, we hear this constantly, that it's hard to be a professor, but also have to wear a different hat in terms of, new online responsibilities, taking your content and having to be the one to architect it into some kind of online form. So there's been a real shift in terms of priorities, in terms of workload, but I'm here to tell you that that balance, has vastly improved by, many third-party entities that are taking your in-classroom content and in just a few months' time, for very little expense, with your oversight, turning that very important in-person content into online. So you have two important mediums that you can now offer. And if you think about the reach of platforms like ours and other platforms, on ours alone, we're reaching almost 44 million people. That's 44 million people that potentially have access to your university's content. So, it goes without saying that we know that universities are short on resources and short on time, but remember, universities are taking our catalog of courses from the best universities in the world and using those as part of their curriculum until they can either make their own online courses, or, as the case in many cases, continuing to use ours, which students obviously like, as long as the content that's being provided is up to the standard of your particular university. The other thing, which maybe we don't think about as much, but I'm sure you all do, is what employers are telling us. And I think this is really where, and I put this together for you being, technical school. In 2019, computer science, data analysis, machine learning, AI, super important, continues to be the most still important tech topics, along with data and, data science and some of the others. But what we're starting to see now is that learners coming out of graduate school and undergraduate have to have an additional set of skills, what we call soft skills. So leadership, communication, emotional intelligence, diversity, inclusion. I can tell you, because I lead our global business development practice globally, so I'm working with enterprises around the world as well as governments. These are becoming equally important in the ecosystem of hiring as the skills that you all are teaching your learners. So there's huge opportunity for higher ed institutions, and this trend will only continue, and simply because of the advancements in technology. So, this whole online world of digital badging and degrees, it's all kind of coming, through this funnel. And no matter whether you are in person or online or a combination of both, it's creating learners that need. It's not voluntary anymore. It's creating a new learner that has a myriad of skills in order to make them relevant and job ready, and to make that enterprise relevant and viable in this kind of new world. So I know I'm just about getting at time, and I'm certainly happy to take some questions, but what I would implore you to think about as you continue your online journey is that a lot of the tools and technology you have, and you are in unique position because you understand technology, but this whole sharing economy, again, like with what edX offers or other platforms, the things that you need until you decide how much of your content needs to go online, it's all there from other top universities. And there's programs like that we offer where it's really what I'll call, to use an American slang, plug and play. We can fill in any gaps that you have, and we can add and subtract, over time. But it's critically important, and I know this is very difficult for faculty, and academia in general, but the learner profile of your typical undergraduate and graduate learner, it's changing. When I went to college, there was no such thing as flexible delivery. There was no hybrid options. There were no cohorts, and there certainly was no self-pacing. But that's the world they live in. And where I got pushback in Dubai from chancellors and provosts and deans is, the fact that they're still arguing for the traditional model. And again, there's certainly a place for in-person, and a significant place, but we have to meet the learners the way they think. And we have to increase access. And you as a university, no matter how well you're endowed, no matter how much funding you have, it's imperative that you're part of this global conversation, and that your brand, your institution is part of that conversation. And it's a tremendous opportunity to mine more students into your curriculum and into your programs. So, I know we're just at time here, but I hope you got something out of this 26 minutes. And I already know, since I know your university, that you're moving in these very important directions in terms of your offerings and figuring out what the future of university existence will look like. So I'm happy to answer questions, but I didn't want to go over time. And again, very appreciative that you've given me this opportunity this afternoon.
Thank you very much, John. All the information you've given were very valuable at this time of the education we're facing. Not to take too much time for the next speakers, I want to ask you just one question, if that's fine. I was wondering how the personalized learning will evolve over the years that we have online education, face-to-face education. Now it's moving to, you said 73% of the students want to take and use the courses fully or partially online. So would you prefer to do personalized learning, or would there be any cultural factors that would affect the adoption of personalized learning? If you could tell us very briefly, please.
If I understand the question correctly, I think students still enjoy learning in groups, but the advantage of online is that the university can form small cohorts of people that will allow them to interact, engage, but can have a less prescriptive, way of learning. That's really the beauty of online. I don't think the future is, if you have 15,000 students, that all students are going to be taking, their own path. But the beauty of what online learning offers for certain groups of students in certain disciplines, they are able to form their own small groups, and because online learning is self-paced and accessible 24/7, it gives the university unique options for their learners. So, and I think we're so nascent in terms of, we're so at the very beginning of what the future looks like. Right now, it's about having the ability to supplement existing content and broadening your offerings with like-minded partners to give your students a much wider variety of access. But I think it's an excellent question, and I think we're going to learn a lot in the next few years about individualized or personalized learning, certainly in institutional settings.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you very much. So I would like to move on with the next speaker. If you're, we hope to meet you in person sometime on other occasions, hopefully. Joe has just arrived. Hello, Joe. Welcome to our meeting.
It's great to be here.
Thank you for joining us today for our 25th anniversary celebration. It's a pleasure to host you here, even online, virtually. I'd like to introduce you to our audience. I have a couple of words to say about you. Professor Paradiso is the Associate Academic Head Program in Media Arts and Sciences in Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He directs the Responsive Environments Group, which explores how sensor networks augment and mediate human experience, interaction, and perception. After 2 years developing precision drift chambers at the Lab for High Energy Physics in ETH in Zurich, he joined the Draper Laboratory, where his research encompassed spacecraft control systems, image processing algorithms, underwater sonar, and precision alignment sensors for large high-energy physics detectors. He joined the Media Lab in 1994, where his current research interests include wireless sensing systems, variable and body sensor networks, sensor systems for built and natural environments, energy harvesting and power management for embedded sensors, ubiquitous and pervasive computing, and the Internet of Things, human-computer interfaces, space-based systems, and interactive music and media. He has written over 350 publications and frequently lectures in these areas. In his spare time, he enjoys designing and building electronic music synthesizers, composing electronic soundscapes, and seeking out edgy and unusual music while traveling the world. After receiving a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering and Physics, summa cum laude from Tufts University, while working on precision inertial guidance systems at Draper Lab, Paradiso became a KT Campton Fellow at the Lab for Nuclear Science at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, receiving his PhD in physics there for research conducted with Professor SCC Tong's group in CERN in Geneva. Thank you again for being here, Joe. It's very nice of you. It's very kind of you to join us in this special event. I would like to announce the title of your talk, Examples of How Artificial Intelligence, Shared Environments, and Distributed Sensing Are Changing Interaction. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I'll pass you. The screen is yours. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot. It's great to be virtually back in Turkey. Speaking about music, I remember when I was in Istanbul some years ago, I took the ferry across the strait and found this wonderful place for psychedelic Turkish music. It was just such a fantastic introduction. Can you guys hear me, or am I locked up? I'm not sure.
Yes,
Hello?
we can hear you.
Okay, good, because you were frozen.
Not everybody can say that.
I'm coming across. That's good. So
I know that you prefer to be interactive, but
we all do.
sorry
but
to interrupt you. I know you prefer to be interactive, but this is set up like this. So.
It's fine with me. It's just I wasn't sure the screen was frozen. It looks good, so I'm going to assume it's not. Let me know in the chat or whatever if it locks up. So I'm going to share my screen here, I don't want to install the Zoom audio device, so I will say no. Hopefully this works. So I'm going to go very quickly through a bunch of projects in my group that talk about not so much exactly AI, but we leverage AI now quite a bit. AI is a tool that all of us are using more and more. I do a lot of work with sensor data in my group, and it's very much not just about how I get the data and how I make the sensors, but really how the data is interpreted in different ways. And we've long used many tools to do that, processing in the network of sensors itself, also processing the back end. And it's intriguing to think about how AI plays a role at all levels. And I'll allude a little bit to that, but I'm going to more give you examples of the kinds of things that we do. So it'll be kind of an application focused talk, very, very fast. So we work at different scales. I don't have time to give you justice to most of this, but we've done work at wearables, the Media Lab, for a long, long time, many, many years. My group is one of the early groups doing wearable sensing at the lab. We still do it. I'll hopefully talk about these glasses in a moment, for example. We do work at building scale, sensors in buildings, to make the building run more efficiently, and different ways of representing that data. Going to be a crucial part, I think, of saving energy as we move forward. Sensors in landscapes as well, outdoor sensing, to see how landscapes are changing, but also to connect that data to people in different ways. We use virtual worlds a lot for that. And now more and more, we have projects in space. Our new director at the Media Lab actually came from a space background, human spaceflight, but I did it myself as well. When I worked with Draper Lab for years, I was in the NASA group doing a lot of work in spacecraft control. So now we're looking at a few projects in space, but mainly looking at sensors, sensing material, even sensor networks in space now. A different era for space. As you heard, and as I mentioned, I love music, lots of different music. This is one of my favorite things to do in normal life, and let's go to a concert. I'm sure many of us have the same passion. You have such great music in Turkey. I'm sure you're going out to shows as much as you can in normal times, but we don't do it very much. This is a show I saw at the Roundhouse in London. I was giving a talk at Imperial College some 4 or 5 years ago, and it's a wonderful theater. You're just packed with people. It's exciting to see what the band do, but you also react to the fact that there's a crowd there. So it made me think a lot about what's special about being somewhere. What's special about presence. This has been a theme in the group for a long time, and every time I go to an event like this, and when I think back on it now, it really comes into the foreground. What's special about presence? This is what we have now. I was at a festival, virtual festivals of band in France. They were great. But watching my living room, I have my pet rabbit there. It's very comfortable. I have a great sound system, but it's not the same as being in one of these real festivals. This is what we got now. It's one of my early group meetings in the pandemic. Great to have so many wonderful people. We're all trying to figure it out. You can see no one's entirely happy there. It's not the same, right? This is not the same as being in front of you guys, seeing your reaction. But we do what we can. We make do. I think there's lots of room for improvement. And it gets to the question of what is it about being somewhere? Now that we have sensors all over the place, can we start to expand experience by connecting to the sensors in different ways, utilizing all these new interactive techniques that are emerging? And my group has been looking at this now for, a good part of the last 15 years. This is an article we wrote in Scientific American. It appeared in many other countries as the cover article, as well as the US. You may have seen it in Turkey. And it was all about, even back in 2014, how people will connect to the sensors that are all over their environment, and how you naturally will try to expand perception in different ways. So this is one of the first examples we did. It's the Media Lab, our new beautiful building. If you could look into it, you'd see maybe all these sensors, right? So this is a visualization of sensors from the HVAC, which are these little fires that are red and white, the temperature, humidity in the atrium, people moving around, which are these arrows and areas. Also, if something is too hot or too cold, we have a blue or a red ball around the temperature sensor. So you rapidly see a lot of what's happening in a space through an animation. It's now called digital twin. Back then there was no name. We called it cross reality. This is 2012, but we'd already been doing it for a little bit. So here we're zooming through the building. You're seeing the sensors that are out of spec. You're seeing the temperature, humidity in the atrium, experiencing it in a new way. And we have audio. We have microphones all over. My group tends to be very skilled with audio. And as you move around, you can hear the sounds from microphones if you're near in the virtual world, near where the physical microphone is. So here I'm going near a microphone. You can hear people moving around, and you can hear people talking. You hear in a moment, but we're very careful about that. We don't want to spy. So at the sensor node, we drop packets of audio. So this is somebody speaking English, but you can't understand anything. You can't even reconstruct it properly. But you can tell if they're laughing. You get some idea of the affect there, the presence, the feeling of presence. That's with RFID. People move around. You can see their icon appear, so on and so forth. Then we move to an outdoor space. Outdoor spaces are real rich environments, as we know. We miss them when we're not connected to them. So we had a cranberry bog in Plymouth that is co-owned by one of my colleagues, retired faculty at the Media Lab. And she was fascinated with the idea of trying to collaborate with us and put sensors all over to capture this whole process of the cranberry bog being turned into a wetland. She was restoring it to its natural state. It was a massive site. I think it was on the order of 20 acres. And we captured the transformation. This is after it had been transformed within a couple of years. And in the process, we put microphones all over the place as well to capture the sounds of the wildlife, and we can stream it to people so they can hear these sounds. It's wonderful to hear, birds and frogs and things like that, hear it change over the course of the year. We even put in cameras to show it. This is not so unusual, but we also built a framework to recognize the different kinds of species. Again, using deep learning and AI, we trained it on stock sounds of different birds. For example, here we could separate different classes. This is done by a visiting student from France. We've got French colleagues now that are taking this much further with us. We did it in real time. So as the microphones produce sound, you could see an icon come up in the virtual world as to what was going on there, be it a different kind of a bird, be it a plane flying over, or some other sound, some insect, frog, so on and so forth. And during the day, of course, you can see this classifier working. If you look at the cache data, you see the frogs in the evening pretty much. This is during the spring. And then you see the birds come out in the morning and later in the day. And then other sounds during the middle of the day when nature is a little quieter. And then if you drill down, you can see the species of bird just starts to break that apart. So we can start doing these things with sensors in natural environments, really getting a feeling for the pulse of the landscape, the pulse of the environment, how different kinds of species are coming in and out, in this case, through the acoustic signature. We've got lots of other projects to localize them. There's no time to talk about that. And to reproduce them in virtual worlds as well, where you can reconstruct the sound and drop it in wherever you want. We have sensors we built, very low power. We built a sensor net of 100 to 200 sensors that were deployed there, still are there running. They run almost all day with a solar cell. They measure lots of different parameters, and they can be extended. Since it's a reformed wetland, it's a wetland now, we put sensors in to measure soil parameters. So all of them have that extension, but we can put lots of other sensors in to talk to them with an app to configure them. This is some of them in a transect. This is a line of sensors going down the area. They form their local network, and then they talk to Wi-Fi base stations that talk with a directional antenna, high gain antenna, to a front end that goes to the network. So we cover this massive property with an architecture like that. And of course, we can tunnel the data into virtual worlds. We do some science with it, see what happens to the wetland over time, but we can also bring it up to people that can't get there. Of course, walking through a wetland, you it's very difficult. You have to have boots. There are ticks that can bite you and give you disease. So in the virtual world, you can visit that free of any of that. So we tried to make virtual worlds vivid, where we took the landscape, modeled the same landscape in the virtual environment, but tunneled the sensor data in through creative animation of different sorts. And this is a video, it's a few years old now, but it shows the weather mirroring the weather in the real world. So we call it an avatar landscape. The music comes from the sensor data. So if it's hotter, colder, humid, less humid, the music will change, and it's localized. As you move around, you hear different sounds, different visualizations to accentuate the sensor data, for example. And it's in a game engine, so you can move through animals. The virtual animals will feed on the sensor data, and they will change their appearance depending on whether it's been hot or cold or humid or whatever. Another mapping, audio and visuals. Again, we've invited composers to do pieces on top of the data, so we have many different interpretations. I believe that sensor data is going to be the canvas of future artists. They're the ones that are going to bring it up to our eyes and ears. We built vehicles so you can browse the whole area with a vehicle. This is Don Haddad's work. Extremely interesting, where you can have no motion sickness because you're in a vehicle, and you can have access to data as well as the visualization. You can play in both. And that leads to thinking about the future of control panels. And we've been thinking a lot about this, these control environments, mission control spaces. If you look at the evolution of spacecraft and cockpits, the early days of Apollo, it followed aviation. This looks like a really big pilot's controlled surface, like you would see in a plane at that time. Of course, more exotic, it's a spacecraft. Days of shuttle, it looked a little bit like the aircraft at that time, where you had video displays and things like that for some of the instruments. Again, a bit more exotic because it is a spacecraft. But now this the SpaceX Dragon capsule looks like my Tesla. You've got a touchscreen interface. So it's changed with the times, changed enormously, and really begs the question, how we're going to be interfacing in these vehicles, in these environments in general, with space operations, with operations even in factories and other places, as the affordances update, and as the whole idea of presence changes. So this is from one of the Matrix movies. It's a fantasy of people in a virtual world with direct neural connection, where this is what they see in their brain, but in the real world, they're kind of passed out in an ugly environment. A few people are still on screens in the back. But yeah, this is kind of what we'd aim for. I don't know if it would look exactly like this. This is still looking like a GUI. It could be very different. But what is this immersive world going to be when we can bring this data really up to people? So my student Don Haddad has been looking at lunar operations together with people in the Aeroastro department at MIT. We're actually putting a sensor payload, I think, on the moon in a rover like this. But can you take all the data coming off of things like this, bring it up to people in different ways, aid in mission planning through immersive VR kinds of operations? So here he has a rover going through the VR environment. It's the simulated landscape of where the rover is going to be moving. You can look at sensor footprints, look at real-time data dropped in different ways. You can zoom in and out. You can have people at different locations have different kinds of access to it, which is one of the really interesting things we're doing. So this is the just one piece of a very big project, but I think it's intriguing to think about how people will cooperate using virtual environments as the intermediary in complicated operations. And then what if you're physically in a place like this? So this is my student Gershon at the Tidmarsh site, the wetland where we had all the sensors and the microphones. But he's got an apparatus in his head where he can basically have all the sensor information tunneled into his real-time hearing in this case. And it responds to how he's moving his head and responds to whether he's being attentive or not. The early version had lots of senses for attention. In addition to bone conduction, we didn't want to cover the ears. This is an extra sense of hearing. The later version was much simpler. For attention, we could just look at how still your head was. That was very effective at gauging at least how focused you were. You could walk through this landscape. We'd track you. We'd see where you were, and we could have the sounds appear as if you had an extra set of ears. So this is a guy from Bose that worked with us. He's one of their fellows, designed all of their great headphones. And for him, this is a very different kind of experience. This is a naturalist we work with. So she's talking about, if you can hear it, all the way it responds to how you move your head. It is like you have an extra set of ears. I've tried it, and it's just an amazing experience. We do a lot of work now in what we call cognitive audio, blending AI and microphones directly, where you train your audio system to hear the way people do. Now we have microphones all over our environments. They respond to their names. I'm not going to say any of their names, because if I do, they may wake up on my watch or something and start to interrupt. But that's a very simple way of doing things. What if you can train these systems to notice things like people do? We talk about even for applications like in cars, where what sounds do you bring into the actual cockpit of the car? There's sounds that would be important to people. So you can do it spectrally like people have done, but it's very coarse. It isn't the best way to do it. If you train a deep learning network to listen like people do, it will respond with sounds that are more valent or relevant for people in different ways. And Schwartz has been developing a whole system to do that. Essentially what she's saying here. What kind of sounds do you remember? She has done a system where she took a whole day or a whole week of somebody's life and would compress it in different ways. So, and you can, again, you can bring it back to you with different emphases depending on how the network has been trained. In this case, there are two of them. There's one network that's kind of looking more for music or things that are musical. There's another network that's looking more for speech. And this is about a year ago. If you listen to this day of my life, if you can hear it. Again, lots of music. I was listening to a lot of Indian ragas at that time, so you hear a lot of things like that. That's me playing my keyboards and synthesizers. So you just have all these kind of musical sounds. This is one that's emphasizing more speech. And it's some microphone artifact.
I don't like it. Does she listen to music on her phone? Oh, the microphone. No, I went there. It's a small enough area to make it into one experiment. Switch. You got to switch. I didn't see any of that because look.
Well, there you go. Again, you can begin to compress your day in different ways. Things that are important to you, things you would remember, you'd notice, things that could be more musical. You can turn the network in different ways. So she's doing her PhD thesis in about a month. And she's got lots of great results. This is only part of what she's doing. The whole idea of cognitive audio goes very deep. We also are looking at measuring other things on people with wearables. For instance, attention is one of the real last frontiers of user interface. It's difficult to really measure. We have some shortcuts to it, like we did at Tidmarsh. An environment like that, if your head is still, you have some idea that you're paying attention. In general, you want to look at other factors. You can look at how the eye's moving, ideally look at pupil diameter. You can look also for cognitive load, which is another relevant thing, about temperature difference between the nose and the temples. You start looking at the EEGs. People have done lots of bits of this. We built a set of normal glasses that measures many of these parameters and then fuses them to build a model of attention. And then using it to build different kinds of user interfaces that ideally help to conserve your attention. One of the problems in our life now is our attention is so fragmented. It's hard for me to remember what I was supposed to do because I'm jerked into something every minute. Is there a way to streamline your life to have your devices start to act to conserve attention in different ways? So we have built a system to do it. It has thermopiles and sensors and IMUs and senses the eye doing different things. We built it actually like a set of glasses. It's quite nice. Doesn't look so unusual. That's more about how we built it. The students learned a lot about how to build these things, working with glasses manufacturers at the Media Lab too. We have many industrial partners. And we have data from it now. It's hard to get user studies during quarantine, but we have some. And sensors are all working, and we're seeing some indication of cognitive load. I mean, it still needs more integration to really do it better, but it looks very promising. So we're ready to start doing more testing in the wild with this now. We're going to roll it out. We got about 10 of them. And yeah, lots of applications. Learning everywhere. Talking about learning online is kind of what we're doing now. In the future, we're going to be learning under the Internet of Things, where we can always be exposed to information. If we're driving a car, if we're sitting around, the system can decide that, okay, this is time maybe to prompt you in a way or to give you information because you're more receptive to it. It's going to be a partnership with learning pretty much all the time, everywhere you are, in a system that's responsive to your mental state. So that's a whole different way to think about it. And we're intrigued by using interfaces like this to look at. Of course, the students want to do events and things like that with it too. We're the media lab. I don't know if I have any time. Should I keep on going quick or should I stop?
I think you can still keep on a couple of minutes. Don't worry,
Okay,
no problem.
So
Because it's very interesting. So I'm sure so many people are also following in the same interest.
I think I can go very fast now, and I'll just go a few minutes to get through it. We've thought a lot for years in my group too about what we call sensei media, where you combine sensors and materials and processing kind of in a soup. So it's making a sensor network like we used to make in large scale environments like we did Tim Marsh do in building. You're building a sensor network now on a substrate. It could be a fabric, could be flexible electronic skin. We've had many different versions of it over the years. This is some examples of dense sensor networks that approach the whole idea of sensei media that we've done. A cork board with sensor nodes that talk to each other through IR to study routing and information processing in sensor nets. A skin that covers a ball, basically. Each one is a sensor node. Floor, this is a flexible one. This is a piece of tape with the sensors all along the tape. So it's like looking at sensors as commodity in material. Many different versions of them that we've made. And we've done lots of work in electronic fabric in the media labs, starting in the 90s, one of the first places to really build systems that worked using electronic textiles. And my student Ermindy has brought it back into my group in the last years, making electronic fabric too. So, he's looking at stretchable connections. He's also worked with Jen and Decavarian at the lab, looking at processors like what we did in the past with sensors, but embedded in with stretchy interconnects and doing it in something like a fabric substrate. He's done many versions of this. He's looked also at sensei weaves, where you can actually weave fabric in a certain way to sense different parameters. He's made large-scale fabrics, things you can wear, things you put on the floor. He's even made keyboards, which of course I love, that can sense different things. They're electrochromic, so they can change color too. This is me. I can actually play it. This is his earlier version. So it's one of the first things that we built. This a musical instrument you can be a little virtuosic on. He's got an even better version of it now. Measures many different parameters. Changes color. You can see it start to do that now. And lots of garments. So you can basically measure, the distribution of pressure and stress and strain at different parts of your body. And he's got lots of applications for that, from astronauts on to public health. And he does machine learning on the data too, to really figure out your gait, how you're moving, if you're doing something wrong, if something is wrong with your physiology somewhere. He's integrating that as well. Lots of stuff from Ermindy. He's got beautiful work. I'm almost done here. We also are putting this in space. So putting sensate threads into fabric. They're already lining spacecraft. It's something they call beta cloth spacesuits, and the white fabric covering spacecraft. That's a special, almost like a Kevlar cloth that's made to withstand space environments, and it's a thermal coating as well to even out the thermal distribution. We're looking at integrating sensors into that to make it sensate, like a real skin. So you can sense micrometeorite impacts, for example, or sense damage to the spacecraft. So my student Juliana has been putting in piezoelectric fibers, and we have launched this on the space station. It's running up there now, a passive sample. It's working there. She's actually shooting microparticles at it in a lab, but now it's running up on the ISS. So there's a sample that's been there now for about a year. This is before she launched it on the left. At the right, this is after 8-9 months on the space station. We see some artifacts. You want to see how the material shows up. This is a passive sample. We think that this little yellowed area in the middle is where someone touched it with skin oils. And in space, atomic oxygen and temperature extreme stuff happens. We'll be getting it back in some months to analyze. But in the meantime, she's launching an active sample in February to actually in real time track micrometeorite impacts and see how the actual electronic properties of the fabric age over time. Many different kinds of sensate fibers in there. So we're looking at different approaches. And of course, we have other projects. This is Feng Zhang's micro robots to look at space structures, to look at their health. We've run them in zero gravity flights. We have zero gravity flights every year at the Media Lab. So here are the robots basically just doing their thing in zero gravity, moving around. And again, they can measure lots of things about the structure. They're rolling across in addition to take images to look for damage, so on and so forth. And finally, my student Feng Zhang is looking at, as I mentioned, lunar sensor nodes. So based on the experience we have at Titmarsh and thinking about what we want to do in a harsh environment, physically putting a sensor node out on the moon to measure different parameters. And we're talking to a company that makes a rover. I think we may have a manifest to put these on a rover so we can send them out. We look at ballistically deploying them, where ideally we'd shoot them out. You can aim like a gun and shoot this thing out with a spring, because the rover can't get everywhere. You can just throw a sensor node over to where you can't get and make a measurement. You can't use a drone on the moon. There's no atmosphere, but you can shoot things pretty far. So once there's gravity, you know exactly where they land. So we're developing the node. We already have a node developed. We have a chance to fly it actually, if we can finalize by next spring. This could fly within a year to the moon. It's this node. You can change sensors, reconfigure it. It's like a microsat based on that idea. And that's us finally. So thank you very much. This is a good part of the group. We can start to be in person again in the US. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was an excellent talk, very condensed. And thank you for touching all the different types of things you're doing in the Media Lab. I'm really excited to watch it. The visualization of sensor data on music and art, and I think that those will drive music and art in the future as well. All these spacecraft interfaces. I have some notes, but I could actually ask many questions. But one of the audiences asked, maybe I should start with that. The last textiles you have shown, do you think these will do some measurements on EEG, GSR? I think it's our medical informatics student. He's asking, these textiles you have shown us, can they actually measure EEG or GSR? Can they do those sort of measurements, or do you have any plans for those sort of studies? He says.
Yeah, absolutely. Ermindy, I believe, has measured GSR on them. EEG, people have made e-textiles that can do EEG, so you can do that as well. He's doing mainly EKG, right? So he has a chest garment where he can do EKG, so that he does. And if you do that, you can do different things of that sort. They also measure stress, so you can get breathing. I mean, there's been a lot of work in Europe over many years of vests to measure all of this, but at this point now you can knit them much more elegantly. They can hold up much better. And he looks at even blood pressure now, because he sees how different parts, so you can constrict it and start to see maybe a pulse response or a different kinds of differential response to blood flow in different parts of the body. So it's one of his parasaltic suit he's making now is looking at that. So there's a huge frontier, both as an electrode, which is what you mentioned. You can just have the conductive materials in there. But also measuring strain, stress. You can get into other physiological factors that way too.
Thank you. So I haven't read many questions so far, but thank you very much. It was a very interesting speech. Thank you so much. Seeing all the research you've been doing.
Thank you too.
Currently doing.
It's a pleasure to virtually visit you guys.
Thank you. We hope we could do it face to face sometime for maybe 30th anniversary celebrations. We could do it face to face and hope to meet you here in person or before then. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And sharing your time with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good event. Bye-bye.
Paradiso. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Oscar.
Okay, we'd like to thank.
for joining us today. Thank you.
Okay, class.
The Graduate School of Informatics provides a unique research and learning environment in the interdisciplinary fields of information and information technology. Our faculty and students are a diverse group with a wide variety of experiences and interests. In the next session, I invite the department chairs to introduce our graduate programs and the active research groups and labs in the Informatics Institute.
Hello, I'm Sevgi Özkan Yıldırım. I'm the head of Department of Information Systems. It's very nice to be here for celebrating the 25th anniversary of our institute. I would like to give you some information about our department, as Information Systems is the largest department of the Informatics Institute from various perspectives, including faculty size and student population. There is a need for professionals who can develop, acquire, and analyze information systems, and that was the main driving goal for having the department in the institute. Primary goals are educating students coming from different disciplines and transforming them into information systems specialists. And the other goal is to meet the faculty member needs of information system and computer science departments of universities. And the third, meeting the needs of industry and private and public sectors for information systems and IT professionals. We have a number of specialization options, not limited to these 5, but I'll just mention the 5 here. Data science, digital transformation, software technologies and management, management information systems, information and communication technologies. And we have 4 different programs. The Information Systems Master's Program, established in 1996, quite an old program, and Information Systems PhD Program, established in 2000, and Software Management Program, which is a degree for professionals. It's a non-thesis Master's Program, established in 2001. And currently we have 66 PhD students, 100 MS Masters with thesis students, and around 50 software management program students. And we have 8 faculty members, full-time faculty members, 31 affiliated faculty and 6 part-time faculty, 17 research assistants and 1 administrative staff. So far, the number of graduates we have, PhD graduates is over 100, it's about 109, and master's graduates are over 409. And software management program, we have 221 graduates. Software management master's degree program is the first of such program in Turkey. It aims to develop, enhance the development of the software sector in Turkey and developing methods and techniques for management, development and continuity of software systems and raising future scientists in this field. Other research areas I can mention about our department are, having mentioned management information systems, software development and acquisition, technology acceptance, data mining, human-computer interaction, intelligent systems, multimedia, computer networks, e-government, and other E and smart cities, IoTs, artificial intelligence, etc., all the current technologies. And looking into these technologies, not from the technical perspective only, but only from the behavioral side, also from the behavioral side. So it's combining social and technical perspectives of information systems under one department. And there is another duty for our department, which is IS 100 course. It's a service level course that's called Introduction to Information System Technologies, and it's given throughout the university, and it's over 1,000 students take it every semester. This semester is 1,400, I think, and it's about 15 to 20 teaching staff educated to this course in terms of teaching, content development, database management, and evaluation. And in addition to these, I've spoken, we have a number of running projects, of course, which the lab staff can talk about it. And it's an ongoing dynamic department, and we're happy to be here as a family. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ceyhan Temirci. I have the great honor today to introduce our Cognitive Science Department, of which I'm currently the chair, on the occasion of the 25th anniversary of the Graduate School of Informatics, or Informatics Institute as we often call it. The Cognitive Science Department was founded in 1996 as one of the first departments of the Informatics Institute. It offered the first degrees in cognitive science in Turkey in both master's and PhD degrees. Cognitive science is a relatively new discipline that emerged in the 1950s, yet it has become one of the most fascinating and productive sciences of our times. Cognitive science studies mental processes and intelligence in humans, in animals, in artificial systems, or in the abstract. It is interdisciplinary, as it is closely linked to areas in psychology, linguistics, computation, philosophy, neurology, and many other fields. Yet, it has always had its own characteristic tenets and methods that distinguish it from neighboring disciplines. Our department currently hosts 7 full-time faculty and works with many other affiliated professors. Until now, we have graduated 215 students, 180 from masters and 35 from the PhD program. Our students come from various academic backgrounds, including computer science, electronics engineering, psychology, English language teaching, philosophy, industrial engineering, biology and genetics, among many others. Our graduates venture into various sectors, including teaching and research, technology development, industrial applications, and management. The number of publications by our academic faculty as the sole or co-author in journals included in the top-ranked citation indices, and only in the last 3 years is 34, and much higher numbers of publications in other journals, books, or conference proceedings. Ongoing research within the department includes projects, research groups, and labs, including the following: the Turkish Discourse Bank, created between 2008 and 2011 and continuously being enriched since then with new annotations. A discourse annotated corpora to provide inputs for NLP systems and linguistic research. An emerging laboratory for formal and computational semantics. Ongoing research on probabilistic machine learning and decision-making models. Ongoing research in multimodal interaction in eye movements in Turkish reading. Affiliations with the Human Factors in Defense Systems Laboratory in METU. Affiliations with the METU Human Computer Interaction Research and Application Laboratory. Contributions to university ranking by Academic Performance Research Laboratory, as well as being part of many international collaboration projects. We warmly invite students, researchers, and professors who are willing to join us or collaborate with us in this exciting experience of learning and sharing in cognitive science.
Hello, my name is Cihangir Tezcan. I'm the head of Department of Cybersecurity at Informatics Institute at the Middle East Technical University. Today, we are celebrating the 25th anniversary of Informatics Institute. Of course, the Department of Cybersecurity is not as old as the institute itself, and we founded the Department of Cybersecurity in 2015, and until recently, we were referred to as the youngest department in this institute. However, we lost that title to Department of Data Informatics, which is founded recently. A need for Department of Cybersecurity was clear around the year 2014, and While the institute was working on this, we initially founded a cyber defense and security laboratory, which we call CIDES in short. So CIDES predates the department, and it had many projects and publications before the foundation of our department in 2015. Thus, we transferred this knowledge from the laboratory to the department, which enriched the curriculum of the department and also helped the students in their studies. Today, we have a very broad curriculum that covers almost every subject related to cybersecurity. Currently, we offer master's degree with 2 programs, the thesis option and the non-thesis option. However, we are working on to offer PhD degree in cybersecurity in the future. Today we have 80 students, and we had our first graduates in the spring of 2016. Since the foundation of the department, we have awarded 54 master's degrees to our students, and 22 of them were with thesis. During the last 6 years, our department hosted many workshops and provided many national and international trainings, and we had a very good amount of publications. Today, our aim is to evolve into an internationally recognized institute for research in cybersecurity and related areas of information security. So in this respect, we are increasing our research collaborations with internationally recognized institutes and universities. The graduate program of cybersecurity has been a huge success so far. So at this 25th anniversary of our institute, I would like to thank our students, graduates, instructors, administrative staff, and previous heads of our department for the success of Department of Cybersecurity and Informatics Institute. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Günter Tezcan, and I'm in charge of Cyber Defense and Security Laboratory at Informatics Institute. At this 25th anniversary of our institute, I'd like to briefly introduce our laboratory in this talk. So I will briefly mention our history and what we have done so far and what we are doing for raising awareness. Then I will briefly mention our research highlights. And our research topics include cryptanalysis, password cracking, smart card security, GSM security, parallel computing, anomaly detection, Internet of Things and lightweight cryptography, blockchain and cryptocurrency technologies. So our laboratory is called CIDES in short, and it was founded in 2014 by the Informatics Institute with the invaluable support of our industrial sponsor, Komodo Group. This is a thematic research laboratory, and it is recognized by NATO. So, in order not to leak information, it is a common practice in cybersecurity to not to share a picture of the lab or the place. So this is why I'm not sharing the picture or not giving the exact details of our hardware. But we have a different room which consists of 17 PCs for trainings and capture the flag events. And in our main laboratory, we had a lot of devices for different purposes, but I can say that we have a huge computational power. So with NATO, we had some meetings before, and we also provided international advanced cyber defense training program for many countries, and also a similar training program is available for Turkish institutions. And in the past, we also collaborated with Komodo a lot, but we are also open to collaborate with any other institutes or companies. In order to raise awareness, we had many events like Hackmetu, or we held symposiums and trainings. We had a Pink Hat Hacker project to encourage women in to work in the area of cybersecurity. We published many white papers, chronicles, academic papers, but more importantly, we make our source codes publicly available on GitHub. We provide free Udemy courses in Turkish, and currently more than 8,000 students are registered for them. And we also publish a lot of YouTube videos, and currently in total we publish more than 60 hours of material. So in our research, one of the main areas we work is cryptanalysis. So far we provided the best known cryptanalytic attacks on the ciphers listed here. We also provided best brute force attacks to see which key length is secure in the area of cryptography. For GSM communication, we improved previous results and obtain better rainbow tables. So it is we showed that it is very easy to listen to any 2G communication in real time. We also recently showed that it's practical to attack 80-bit security with a lot of GPUs, and there are many standards with 80-bit security, so we recently showed that it is not secure anymore. In another area, we achieved around 900 gigabits per second of AES encryption on a single GPU, which is very important for servers which is busy with encryption. We developed many automated tools for cryptanalysis techniques. We also developed many testing software for the area of randomness and entropy. For the smart card security, we provided an internal report on the security of our university ID cards and the readers. And we also reduced the time required for offline attacks on some smart cards that use MyFair Classic chips. And we reduced the time from a few months to a few hours, again, by using parallel computing power of GPUs. And another area we work is blockchain technology. For the cryptocurrency mining, we optimize many cryptographic algorithms for GPUs, which increases the computational power of many cryptocurrency miners. And this way, these cryptocurrencies became more resistant to 51% attacks. We had a NATO exploratory team. We worked in this team. And currently, we are about to publish a book chapter about cryptographic foundations of the blockchain technology. And we transferred this knowledge from the laboratory to Department of Cybersecurity. So this way, we are going to introduce a new course titled Blockchain and Cryptocurrency Technologies in the next semester. And finally, very recently, our project is accepted by NVIDIA with the title Optimization of Network Security and Cryptography Algorithms. And NVIDIA was kind enough to donate 2 data processing units, DPUs, for this project. And it is we are waiting these devices to work on this new project. And at this 25th anniversary of our institute, I would like to thank our past and present group members. Thank you for your attention.
Welcome everyone. This is Elif Sürer and I am the chair of METÜ Multimedia Informatics program, and today I'm going to introduce our program to you. So first of all, what is multimedia informatics? It is processing visual, audio and haptic content by taking into account the user experience. We do have quite an interdisciplinary dimension, and there are lots of related sectors here like defense, broadcasting, entertainment industries and serious games. And there are several projects from our department. Some of them are national projects from TÜBİTAK, and some of them are European Union projects. And you can see that they are based on like deep learning, audio, serious games, and so on. And the related projects slide continues here as well. And we do have quite a vast research infrastructure. And today, our professors are going to introduce their own laboratories to you. So I'm not going to go into detail here. And we do have full-time faculty, 4 full-time faculty, and we do have several affiliated faculty from very different departments given the interdisciplinary nature of our work. And we do have full-time research and course assistants, and we have 1 administrative staff. We do have an advisory board where we are asking our annual progress and we are asking for suggestions. And there are professors from Finland, United Kingdom, United States of America, and Italy. And we do have several internal collaborations within METU, as you may see here. And we do have several international collaborations, and our professors are still involved with these universities. Some of our professors have already graduated from there. Some of them are writing projects here. So we do have quite a good synergy here. We are organizing several events and scientific activities, workshops, summer workshops, hackathons, and summer schools, and so on. You can see a list of those. And thank you very much for listening to us. And you can see our official Twitter account, website, and some laboratories Twitter accounts, so you can follow us. Thank you very much.
METU's Special Audio Research Group was founded in 2013 to consolidate the audio signal processing research activities at the Graduate School of Informatics. It is the first and still the only research group in Turkey that is dedicated to audio and acoustical signal processing. The research group hosts the METU Spark Audio Lab, which is a purpose-built facility for audio and acoustics research. Between 2013 and 2021, there had been 1 doctoral and 10 master's graduates from the research group, and these students were from different departments from within the Graduate School of Informatics and not only Multimedia Informatics department. Currently, the membership of the research group includes 5 doctoral students and 10 master's students. The current research teams within the group include acoustic source separation and dereverberation, an algorithm that we developed recently became a part of the MPI-K standard. We do work on object-based audio, on acoustics-informed robot navigation. We recently started working on 6 degrees of freedom immersive audio capture and rendering. We do work on room acoustics modeling and simulation, including artificial reverberators, specifically for games and virtual environments. We do work on microphone array design. We sometimes design and build our own microphone arrays for our research. And finally, we work on the cognitive aspects of spatial auditory perception. We do collaborate with researchers and research groups from around the world. We do collaborate with King's College London and the University of Surrey from the UK. We do work together with Stanford University, Karma. We started collaborating with Microphone Technologies in the Netherlands and Mezzo Studio in Turkey. With Microphone Technologies, we work on microphone array design, and with Mezzo Studio, we work on coupled volume room acoustics, simulation, and modeling of coupled volume acoustics. We also work with arts institutions and music schools. We do work with the School of Music of Başkent University in Ankara, and we also work with the Presidential Symphony Orchestra. Last but not least, we do contribute to standardization efforts within the recently founded Moving Pictures Audio and Data Coding with Artificial Intelligence, MPI, which is a standardization body. So this was about Meadows Park. Hope you will enjoy the rest of the presentations for the anniversary talks. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Erdem, Erdem Akagündüz. I'm with the Department of Multimedia Informatics at the Graduate School of Informatics, METÜ. Our chairperson, Elif Sürer, has already provided information about our department, our research topics, and our fields of interests. And at this point, I'd like to give you some information about my and my students' interests and what our group is working on. So let me share some slides with you. So me and my students' research is mainly on deep learning applied to different interdisciplinary subjects, from control engineering to earthquake engineering. And we also focus on the embedded side of deep learning as well, how we can optimize embedded deep learning systems to embedded devices. I'm currently lecturing some courses around these subjects, so image processing or motion capture, and mainly about deep learning applied to sequence models and embedded systems. For this presentation, I'd like to give you some information about a specific government-funded project that we are currently working on. This is a project in partnership with Kadir Has University in Istanbul with Dr. Salih Tileyloğlu. It's a TÜBİTAK 1000 project. It's about parameter estimation using earthquake accelerogram records and using deep learning. So the goal of the project is we have thousands of accelerogram records, and some of these accelerogram records are annotated by some experts regarding their earthquake parameters and their soil parameters. And we are using deep learning techniques to estimate important parameters of the earthquake, such as PS phase moments or the average seismic shear weight velocity, which is an important parameter for soil, for civil engineers, by using deep learning techniques. So let me give you what we are currently doing in this project. Well, this is an earthquake. An earthquake occurs deep in the surface of the earth, and it just sends waves throughout the Earth's surface, and these waves travel, they change, and they are being recorded by accelerometers at earthquake stations, and you obtain accelerogram records. And these records are kept in some metadata formats, which you keep the station coordinates and the accelerogram records at some sampling rate as well. So what we do is, where we get the data? Actually, the Ministry of Interior of Turkey has a presidency for this, the Disaster and Emergency Management Presidency. They have all this data publicly available. You can download it. We have downloaded hundreds of thousands of accelerogram records. And we are currently working on a deep learning model in which we feed the accelerogram, we first convert them to spectrograms, we feed them to a convolutional encoder, we estimate the parameters in the first phase of the experiment, and the second phase will be feeding sequences of these pieces, spectrograms, so that we'll be able to train a CNN plus RNN architecture to estimate a parameter of an earthquake. So this is mainly one of the important projects that we are working on. Our titles are similar to these, where we are trying to apply different deep learning techniques to different sensors and multimedia outputs. Thank you for listening. I hope we'll have some sort of collaboration with you in the future.
Welcome everyone, this is Elif Sürer, and today I'm going to introduce you Entertainment Computing and Interactive Systems Laboratory. So our research interests are mainly on virtual reality, augmented reality and mixed reality, and we are also working on video games, serious games and simulations. These are our graduate students who have graduated during these 4 years. And these are our current projects. We have several European Union level projects. We do have regional projects, TÜBİTAK projects as well, mainly working on the serious games and the CBRNE and also Down syndrome. We do have several external collaborators from University of Milan, Sassari, Roma Tor Vergata, Turin, and we are also involved in several consortia. So you're very much familiar with video games, but whenever I do say the serious games are the games that do have ulterior motives rather than only entertainment. So you can use them in education, healthcare, and also training. So these are examples from some of our projects. Whole Arc project is a collaboration with the METU Department of Architecture. So we have built a virtual reality and mixed reality based building information based modeling tool. And these are some of the screenshots from our Whole Arc project. We have also developed a mixed reality application in basic design, again with the design of architecture. We have collaborations with Bilkent University as well, and this was a VR project in basic design. And we had seen that actually after making a comparison with VR-based group and paper-based group, the results were quite promising. And we are also part of a European Union project, eNotice, European Network of CBRN Training Centers. eNotice is a framework of a European Union network. We do have a web-based information platform, and we do have several joint activities where we do travel and make training in different countries. And this is an example from a tabletop simulation from France. This is an exercise, a joint activity from Belgium. And this is the complex scenario of that example. And we have developed a scenario-based generator where we can develop easily mini games out of those scenarios. And these are like simple screenshots from those. And we had organized eNotice METU joint activity in 2020, just before the pandemic actually, and we had modeled an oversight mine in virtual reality and mixed reality. Thank you very much for listening to us.
Welcome to the 25th year celebration of Informatics Institute of METU. On behalf of Health Informatics Department, I will briefly introduce our program, student and faculty. Health Informatics Department is one of the 6 departments in Graduate School of Informatics. We offer a PhD program in Medical Informatics, a Master of Science program in Medical Informatics, and a Master of Science program in Bioinformatics. Since 2003, we had over 120 alumni, and currently in fall 2021, we have over 80 registered students. Our current faculty is Professor Erkan Mumcuoğlu, Associate Professor Tolga Esat Özkut, Associate Professor Yeşim Aydınson, myself, Assistant Professor Aybar Canacar, and Assistant Professor Burçak Hoplu Sartaş. In clinical informatics area, we do study health information systems, electronic health records, and networking, telemedicine, mobile health, and future studies in health. Medical informatics programs also study medical signal and image analysis. And our research in medical image analysis is also integrated with machine learning algorithms and pattern recognition studies. In the area of bioinformatics, we do study biological databases, systems biology, statistical modeling, array and next generation technologies, sequence analysis and algorithms, and also clinical bioinformatics. In the neuroinformatics area, we do offer training to our students on the foundation and philosophy of neuroscience, along with our ongoing research in brain dynamics, oscillations, neural networks, and optimization. As a program, in 2005, Health Informatics Department founded an international conference series called HIBIT, Health Informatics and Bioinformatics Technologies Conference. And since 2005, this conference has been held annually. And as Health Informatics Department, we have organized several of these events in previous years. And also in 2022, again, Middle East Technical University and Health Informatics Department will be hosting this conference. You can learn more about our ongoing research and facilities from the short videos you will see during this event. And those short videos are prepared by our students, scholars, and faculty. And we have 4 distinct laboratories, research laboratories in bioinformatics and medical informatics, council systems laboratories, and neurosignal laboratories where EEG studies are conducted. And for further questions, you can visit our website and contact us through our emails. And also, I hope you will follow our Twitter so that we can keep in touch.
We work at the Health Informatics and Bioinformatics labs on the Informatics Institute. Our projects are composed purely of computational biology. We try to solve biological problems using statistics, mathematics, and computational power.
Hello, I'm I have a bachelor's degree in Bilkent University, Molecular Biology and Genetics Department. Then I did a master's degree in Bioinformatics, Informatics Institute. Currently, I'm continuing my studies as a PhD student in Medical Informatics at the Informatics Institute.
My research interests lie in evolutionary biology and computational biology, and the topic of our research is conservation analysis and variant effect prediction of giant muscle proteins that play important roles in muscle elasticity, stress response, and sarcomeric organization. These proteins are shown to be cause of multiple muscle diseases, and in particular cardiomyopathies when mutated. For this project, we are in collaboration with Adebali Lab from Sabancı University.
We use computational biology methods to analyze protein sequence data from multiple species to learn about how giant muscle proteins were evolved and what more conserved regions of these proteins are. Apart from our interest in determining how these proteins work, this information can also be used in conjunction with public variant databases and patient data obtained from university hospitals.
Hi, I'm I graduated from Mathematics Department from Middle East Technical University. Currently, I'm a PhD student at the Medical Informatics Department here at the Informatics Institute.
In my PhD project, we aim to identify latent driver mutations by leveraging double mutations. For this study, we used mutation profiles of nearly 80,000 tumors from nearly 30 tissues. We find out that Sim double mutations are tissue-specific, or they also could be metastatic markers. Moreover, double mutations could be related to drug sensitivity or resistance due to the alterations in protein conformation. Finally, we evaluate our results on preclinical models like cell lines and patient-derived xenografts to discover clinical outcomes.
Hi, my name is Ece. I'm a research assistant at the Informatics Institute, Department of Medical Informatics. Usually, I'm the assistant of signal and image processing courses. Today, I'll introduce to you our neurosignal lab, EEG lab. Let's start. At the entrance, the laboratory starts with a Faraday cage, which provides sound and signal isolation while experimenting. We do our experiments here. And there is an EEG device over there. Participants sit at the table with the experiment on the screen. A camera is attached to the computer. The reason for having a camera is able to absorb the insight from the outside. Because we closed the cage completely during the experiment, we could not see the participants from the outside. As I just mentioned, this computer where we can see the participant with the help of the camera inside, we can check the condition of the participants from here. We conduct and control our experiments through these computers. One of our co-workers worked there. This is a salt-containing gel that keeps the electrodes in contact with the skin. We put this gel in the syringe and squeeze into the electrodes. We wash all the electrodes with the shampoo before and after the experiment, wash them completely with an alcohol. Then with the help of the tape measure, we look at the measurements here. Place the cape on our participant with this diagram. After placing the cape suitable for the head size of the participant, we put all electrodes in the cape by following the diagram. We fill the electrodes with the conductive gel I showed with the syringe, and this process that we almost starts. With the ear stick, we ensure that the electrodes are in good contact with the skin, and with the help of the program, we control if it is in contact. Let me show you EEG cap what I was talking about. And with the tape measure, we choose the cap according to the appropriate size.
Hello, my name is Seda. I have graduated from Microbiological Sciences Department and currently I'm a master's student at Bioinformatics Department. And at the same time, I'm a research scholar at the Castle Genome Laboratory. And now I will give some brief information about the research project that I've been part of. Within the scope of the TÜBİTAK project, we aim to develop a genotyping kit for the early and differential diagnosis of late-onset Alzheimer's disease. For that purpose, we designed primers to target the regions of interest. After that, we isolated DNA from the saliva examples of the Alzheimer's patients collected beforehand. And then we ran PCR experiments to amplify the DNA region that we are interested in. And as the final step, pyrosequencing is used to get the pyrograms which are necessary to interpret the results. All these steps are repeated for 33 cases, 38 controls, and for 32 variants. As a result of our research, we have identified potential biomarkers that could support the clinician's decisions in the early and differential diagnosis of late-onset Alzheimer's disease, and benefit the patients and their families for the planning of the treatment and support strategies.
Merhaba, adım Deniz Cansel Kahraman. Bilkent Üniversitesi Moleküler Biyoloji ve Genetik bölümünü tamamladıktan sonra doktora eğitiminde orada devam ettim. Daha sonrasında doktora sonrası araştırmalarım için Kansil'e katıldım. Şu anda Kansil'de öğretim görevlisiyim. Bu süreçte karaciğer kanseri üzerine farklı çalışmalar yaptım. Öncelikle karaciğer kanseri için yeni ilaç keşfi, karaciğer kanserinin dirençli olduğu durumlar için mekanizmaların çalışılması, kök hücreler üzerine, kanser kök hücreler üzerine bazı çalışmalar yaptım. Kansil'de araştırmalarımızı gerçekleştirirken informatik alanında farklı uygulamalardan da faydalanıyoruz. Özellikle birlikte çalıştığımız bu konuda uzman hocalarımız ile derin öğrenme ve yapay zeka ile geliştirilen araçlardan elde edilen sonuçların ıslak laboratuvar çalışmaları ile doğrulanması ve bu araçların geliştirilmesi için gerekli gen ifade analizi verilerinin sağlanması aşamalarında laboratuvarımız önemli bir yere sahip. Şu anda bulunduğum laboratuvarımızda karaciğer kanseri hücre hatlarıyla yaptığımız sitotoksisite analizleri ve hücresel boyutta yapılan analizleri destekleyen bir altyapımız bulunmakta. Hücre kültürü, hücre büyümesi veya göçü tayin edebilen gerçek zamanlı hücre analiz sistemleri, akış sitometri, floresan aktive hücre ayırıcı, floresan ve gerçek zamanlı mikroskopi cihazları bu altyapının en önemli parçaları. Laboratuvarımızda hem biyoinformatik alanında hem de biyolojik bilimlerde yüksek lisans yapan öğrenciler ile çalışmalar yapıyoruz.
Merhaba, ben Esra Nalban. Enstitümüzün Sağlık Bilişimi programında doktora çalışmalarımı yürütmekteyim. Aynı bölümde araştırma görevlisi olarak çalışmaktayım. Karaciğer kanserine karşı yeni ilaç adaylarının keşfini hedefleyen Kansil'de özellikle hali hazırda farklı kanser türleri ve başka hastalıklarda kullanılan ilaçların karaciğer kanseri için yeniden konumlandırılması konusunda çalışmalar yapmaktayım. Makine öğrenmesine dayalı gerçekleştirilen ilaç hedef tahmin araçlarının geliştirilmesi ve doğrulanması yönünde çalışmalar son dönemde oldukça önemli hale geldi. İlaç keşfinin yalnızca laboratuvar çalışmaları ile oldukça uzun zaman ve yüksek bütçeleriyle gerçekleştirilmesi problemine çözüm sunabilecek bu yaklaşım ile karaciğer kanseri gibi oldukça agresif ve dirençli olan kanser türlerine karşı etkili olabilecek ilaçları ya da ilaç kombinasyonlarını keşfetmeyi hedeflemekteyim. Bunun yanı sıra işbirliği yaptığımız laboratuvarlar tarafından geliştirilen ve karaciğer kanserinde fazlaca aktif olduklarını bildiğimiz sinyal yolaklarında etkili olabileceği düşünülen ilaç adaylarının moleküler mekanizmalarının aydınlatılması için preklinik deneylerine devam etmekteyim.
Merhaba, ben Altay Koyaş. ODTÜ Informatik Enstitüsü Sağlık Bilişimi Anabilim Dalı doktora öğrencisiyim. Doktora çalışmalarım dahilinde karaciğer kanseri üzerinde etkili olabilecek yeni ilaç aday moleküllerinin validasyonu ve modellemesi üzerine çalışma yapmaktayım. Bugün sizlere kanser genom laboratuvarı hakkında biraz bilgi vermek istiyorum. Bulunduğumuz laboratuvarda yoğunlukla gen ifade analizi ile ilgili çalışmalara ağırlık veriyoruz. Kanser genom olarak da bilinen bu laboratuvarımız, nükleik asit, saflık ve konsantrasyon ölçüm cihazları, gerçek zamanlı kantitatif PCR, Türkiye'de bulunan iki sistemden biri olan NanoString Encounter analiz sistemi ve primer hücre kültürü çalışmaları için bir alana sahip. Karaciğer kanseri üzerinde bilinen ve yeni ilaç adaylarının RNA, DNA ve protein düzeyinde meydana getirdikleri değişimlere bağlı olarak etki mekanizmalarının anlaşılması için kullandığımız NanoString sistemi oldukça hassas, yeni nesil nanoteknolojik bir platform.
Merhaba, ben ODTÜ Kanser Laboratuvarı'ndan proje destek uzmanı Tuğçe Gülokşaklı. Bugün sizlere kanser bünyesinde yapmış olduğumuz FDA onaylı prosikna testinden bahsedeceğim. Yeni nesil prognostik meme kanseri testi olarak da bilinen bu testi Türkiye'de gerçekleştirebilen ikinci laboratuvarız. Hastaların meme kanseri türünün doğru belirlenmesi ve tedavi protokolünün belirlenmesi için oldukça etkili bir test. Ve bu testten nanostring sisteminden yardım almaktayız. Bu sistem ile kişinin genetik profili üzerinden hastalığın tekrarlama olasılığı hesaplanabilmekte ve buna bağlı olarak kemoterapi ve tedavi süreci şekillendirilebilmektedir.
Our interdisciplinary programs range from artificial intelligence to game technologies, which make a big part of the industry of the future. Now, I would like to invite Assistant Professor Dr. Elif Sürer, Head of the Modeling and Simulation Department, to present Dr. Günter Wallner to deliver his speech.
Thank you so much, Kerem. It is great to be here. Welcome, Günter. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you.
Günter has actually arrived to our institute in 2020 as well, just before the pandemic. So we are looking forward to having the physical meetings soon. Let me introduce Günter to you. Günter Wallner is professor for game computing at the Johannes Kepler University Linz and holds positions at the Eindhoven University of Technology and Ontario Tech University. His research interests lie at the intersection of games user research, data analytics, and information visualization. His work particularly centers on understanding player behavior in games and on researching methods to explore and communicate the collected data to derive actionable insights for game design and development. As part of this, he is working on data visualizations to support the analysis of increasingly large-scale player behavioral data sets used in game analytics. His work has been published in international journals and conference proceedings, such as Kai, Play, FDG, Computers and Graphics, and Entertainment Computing. He is editor of the Data Analytics Applications in Gaming and Entertainment. Today, Günter Wallner is going to present us his talk, Empowering Players Through Data. The stage is yours, Günter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen. Does that work?
Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Okay. So many thanks for the introduction, and many thanks for the invitation to give a talk today at the 25th anniversary celebrations. And today I would like to talk a little bit about data, specifically how data can be used to empower players. I also prepared this slide to introduce myself, but I think Elif now already covered most of it. So these are just a couple of examples of visualizations we did over the last years. So I will skip that now and just start with the presentation right away. And when Elif invited me to give a talk at this 25th anniversary, I was wondering what was actually happening 25 years ago in gaming. And it showed that, like, in the mid-90s were actually a pretty exciting time and paving early ground for the interest in data from players that we see today. And this was the first time when Doom and other 3D shooters were getting popular due to the focus on multiplayer gameplay. And internet-based gaming was, of course, just like at the beginning at that time, but these games allowed to compete against each other through network play. And LAN parties have become very popular in the second half of the 90s to allow players to compete against each other. And over time, this evolved into a large business, which we now know as esports. And with games becoming more and more competitive and prize money being paid, players started to increasingly get interested in data about their gameplay to reflect upon and improve their skills. And companies have started to provide more and more data to the community to allow players to access their data, to compare them against each other, and allow them to actually build tools, for instance, for training purposes. And this talk is actually about how we can empower players by providing them with the data which gets shooters were getting popular due to the focus on multiplayer gameplay. And internet-based gaming was, of course, just like at the beginning at that time, but these games allowed to compete against each other through network play. And LAN parties have become very popular in the second half of the 90s to allow players to compete against each other. And over time, this evolved into a large business, which we now know as esports. And with games becoming more and more competitive and prize money being paid, players started to increasingly get interested in data about their gameplay to reflect upon and improve their skills. And companies have started to provide more and more data to the community to allow players to access their data, to compare them against each other, and allow them to actually build tools, for instance, for training purposes, to reconstruct a match. And this in turn has also resulted in an active player community interested in data and in building tools for analyzing and visualizing this data. And we could utilize those players in our study. So those are a couple of visualizations we created. The first visualization is basically the common visualization of how those replays are visualized on websites. And it's basically two visualizations with each map showing the match from the viewpoint of one team. And the second one, which is below, combines the two views into one single map, and additionally shows the lines of fire between the tanks. Those are those small blue and red arrows you can see in the cropped out part. And the third visualization, which is here on the right, is basically an aggregated visualization. So it aggregates the individual movement data rather strongly. And so we evaluated those basically with players, and it showed that all of those were equally informative and suitable for analyzing gameplay. And this visualization, which was basically focusing on the individual movement, was especially lauded for its accurateness. And the aggregated one, especially for being clear, readable, and also aesthetically pleasing. But at the same time, I also need to point out that basically none of those visualizations could completely satisfy all players. So this basically shows that players are quite a heterogeneous group of individuals with contradictory demands, expectations, and preferences. And further research does look into how those visualizations can be dynamically adapted to these demands. So here's another one, so-called hexbin maps. So one of the most frequent tasks if we are talking about gameplay is to basically observe how certain metrics, how certain variables vary across a game map. And this is also reflected in the popularity of heat maps, so which are quite everywhere. And one of the drawbacks of those heat maps is that they usually focus on one variable. And this makes it quite difficult to compare multiple variables against each other and also across a map. And in this work, we addressed this issue by using maps based on hexagonal binning combined with visual glyphs to encode multivariate data. And the maps on this slide use real data from the real-time strategy game StarCraft, and it shows different information such as the number of destroyed units, team information, or the direction of attacks. And we also show a different amount of variables. So how are those maps basically created? So those small glyphs you can see are a variant of the so-called vermin dot. And it's basically composed of two circles. So we have the outer circle that indicates the spatial area to which the data belongs to, and an inner circle which shows the actual data within this area. And by altering those visual attributes, such as the size and the color of the inner circle, multiple data values can be encoded. And in addition, we have those small arrows, which are basically direction indicators, which show directional information, which can also be very interesting for games. So basically, those glyphs have the advantage that they are quite simple, which makes them also readable when they become smaller. So if you have quite many of those on a map, they still remain readable. And the main map itself is subdivided into those regular hexagons used for binning the data, basically. And then a glyph is basically placed within each of those. And this glyph represents the data that is explained a moment ago. And then we basically remove the hexagonal grid so that only the circles remain. And this has now several advantages because with hexagonal binning, it creates areas of equal size, which now makes it easy to make comparisons between areas. And it also makes data captured at different time points comparable, as the subdivision is basically not affected by the actual distribution of the data. So again, we evaluated it. So we basically had a survey with around 200 players. And the survey showed that the participants basically appreciated the display of multiple variables. So it confirmed the value for analyzing gameplay. And those maps even remained readable with 3 and 4 variables. And we also checked if people interpret the data correctly. And the correctness achieved with the maps in terms of like estimating and comparing values was generally good, but sometimes reduced by the visual encoding itself. So one important takeaway message here is that the visual encoding needs to be chosen with care, as it can impact the performance of how players read those visualizations. So to wrap up the part of using data for training, here are some general recommendations for creating post-play visualizations. And we inferred it from another study. So first of all, one needs to carefully choose the data which is included, because not all information is equally important, and the relevance of the information can also differ based on the genre. It's also important to select an appropriate representation for the data, which is of course influenced by the data itself and the task which should be supported. Post-play visualizations are also not restricted to the information which is visible during play, so we can take advantage of that and include data which is otherwise inaccessible. And related to that, it's important to keep in mind that a certain information becomes also more or less relevant after playing. And lastly, players showed high interest in visualizations of high-level concepts that go beyond showing individual low-level data, and which instead require the integration of different types of data. So with those, I would like to move on to another use case, namely how we can use data to explain rules. And many games have quite different or difficult rules, like Dungeons of Dragons, for instance. And we thought that it might be quite useful to basically come up with a visualization which basically explains those rules to players. And here I would like to show you a video which the students have prepared, and which really nicely shows the concept behind that idea. Let me quickly try to start that.
Hi, I'm Daisy O'Neill, and I'll be presenting our paper, True Sight Battle Grid, Enhancing the Game Experience.
Günter, we are not seeing the video. We still do see the slides.
Do you hear the sound?
We do hear the sound, but we don't see the video.
Data visualization is often
no, it's okay.
To provide feedback to players. However, little research has investigated its potential in hybrid physical-digital tabletop games, or for tabletop role-playing games. Building upon the benefits of tangible interfaces, we introduce and report on the design of the True Sight Battle Grid, a modular, tangible battle grid for the role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons. Through visualizing gameplay possibilities with lights, we aim to provide players with information about the fantasy world without being distracting. In the popular tabletop role-playing game, Dungeons & Dragons, players assume the role of a character while the Dungeon Master, or DM, leads them through a story set in a complex fantasy world in order to complete objectives. Players commonly use tabletop maps, or so-called battle grids, to visualize and keep track of what's happening in the game world. Traditionally, these maps range from being simple drawings on grid paper to lovingly handcrafted terrain models. The maps help to collaboratively create and visualize the world, both before and during the game. Through conducting in-depth interviews, we found that tabletop role-playing games often involve lengthy discussions to resolve whether an action is or is not possible in combat. And this in particular can break the flow of the game. To combat this, we built a modular grid with lights that can be controlled by the DM, who sets up the map and loads the player's unique character data beforehand. The four main visualization possibilities of the grid are movement range, spell shapes, attack range, and line of sight. This helps players to see quickly and easily which actions are possible. The lights were also used to visualize the type of terrain, such as water or forest, dynamically light up areas of the map as players discover them, indicate whose turn it was, reveal treasure locations, display character conditions, and to distinguish between similar-looking enemies. Participants reported that the tool reduced interruptions during the game, usually caused by recalling rules or character ranges and making calculations. We also found that the tool makes it possible for both experienced and beginner players to quickly understand what is going on in the game. Our preliminary study indicated that visualizing gameplay possibilities with lights on a tangible battle grid helps role players to quickly understand and communicate gameplay data, as well as foster imagination and create new ways of storytelling compared to the traditional battle grid. Thank you very much, and please feel free to contact us if you have any questions.
So this was just another example on how we can use data. So basically to help players which are new to a game to learn the rules. So I will quickly move through a couple of other use cases now. And the next one is like how we can use data to improve the well-being of players. And here I would like to show another work which we did and which we called Have a Break. And the motivation behind this work was that many players basically spend long times in front of a screen, in front of their gaming devices. And this can have a detrimental effect on the mental and also the physical well-being. And to encourage players to take a break from time to time, we have designed this ambient tool that reminds players to pause gaming through pulsating lights. So how does it work? So we have the device, which is basically connected to a PC. And the PC is also connected to certain sensors. Specifically, we used a galvanic skin response sensor and heart rate data to basically measure the physiological data from the player. And the design of the device was basically guided by the objective to raise awareness while at the same time avoiding to be too disruptive to the gaming experience. So we don't want to pull the attention from the player away from the game actually. And on the other hand, it should be able to place it freely on a desk such that it can be integrated in almost any gaming setup. So, and for the appearance of the tool, you may have noticed it already, we took a little bit of inspiration of how like gaming accessoires and gaming PCs are designed. And when we evaluated the tool with 6 participants, we could see that participants actually took more breaks when the tool was present. And as a side effect, participants also reported that the blue light which we used was also calming and pleasant for them while playing. And they reported that they perceived the tool as a kind reminder to take a break, and they generally did not feel distracted. However, one issue was that sometimes the suggested breaks were not followed and rather ignored because something exciting happened in the game. And this was because the device actually did not take into account the gaming context. So it didn't know what was actually happening in the game. So let's move on to another use case, namely how we can use data to convey emotions experienced during play. And this one was actually not so much for the players, but rather for the parents of players. And the motivation behind this work was that games can basically trigger a variety of emotional experiences. They can induce positive emotions, they can alleviate negative ones, and they may also serve as a positive coping mechanism, which, however, may also become maladaptive at some point. And it can also be used for mood management, for instance, by offering distraction and to reduce stress. So games can basically serve many purposes here. And this, of course, also holds true for adolescents, young adults, which often struggle to talk about their emotions with their parents. And parents, on the other hand, may often not be aware of the impact video games actually have on their child. And as such, we felt that communication can benefit from mediators that basically facilitate that connection, that communication between parents and child. And to help bridge that disconnect between the emotional richness experienced by the players while playing video games and for parents, we designed this tool, which we called Motis. And Motis basically works as follows. So through a webcam and a facial recognition library, the experienced emotions of children while playing a game are tracked and submitted to this tangible device. The device itself consists of a radial base, which is split into 6 sectors, which are reflecting the 6 basic emotions, such as happiness, sadness, and anger. And these emotions are ordered based on how long they were experienced while gaming. And around the device, you can see an LED ring, which basically encircles the device and lights up in different colors to distinguish between those 6 emotions. And the ball also lights up to give some indication that it can be moved around the circle. So I will show a quick video to illustrate how that works. So you pick up the ball, and now you can move it around. And inside the ball there is basically a magnet, and while you move around the circle, the device exerts forces on it, and it basically gives some kind of feedback, and the user feels basically how strongly a certain emotion was experienced. And then when you place the ball again in the middle, the device shows like a summary of the emotions. So in that case, it lights up green. So it was like mostly positive emotions which were felt during play. Again, we did like an evaluation. In that case, we did interviews. So we actually visited parents and child in their homes and brought the device to them. And the interviews basically showed that the device helped to contribute to a positive feeling of awareness. And the results suggest that this happens first and foremost due to the consciousness Motis creates. For instance, one participant stated that Motis made me think about the emotional state of my child, which would normally not pass my mind that often. Oops, sorry. And another one said that when there is no device, you are actually unaware about the fact that there are these many different emotions that are going on while playing. So it also helped to raise consciousness about those issues in the first place. And the increase in awareness was, according to the participants, also supported by the design. And there was a strong consensus that it was very important that the device was tangible, because that heightened the feeling of awareness. So participants, for instance, made remarks that the tangibility influenced my feeling of awareness in a positive way, because it's not only the visual aspect that makes you aware, it's also associated to the magnetic forces of the device. Or another one, motives made me aware since I really needed to interact with it and experience it. The tangibleness supports that, since you really need to search for the emotions instead of just like seeing it on a screen, for instance. So like the tangible device forced basically the users to engage more deeply in the data, because we had to engage with it and not just view it on a screen. And I think with that, I'm also mostly, the time is mostly up. So I would just quickly recap that in that presentation, I basically just showed a couple of examples of how we can use data to empower players, like for training, but it's not just training, it's also to improve well-being, to help them understand play, and also to convey emotions. And I think like the basic message I wanted to convey is that there are so many ways that data can empower players. So it's important to think outside the box and basically see how we can use that data for the benefit of everyone. Thank you very much. And our results indicate that the display of multiple variables at once. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Günter. It was a very interesting presentation. I will have a couple of questions to ask you. So all those tangible devices that you had designed, they were mainly for the awareness. Are you planning to embed them as a feedback mechanism and also changing the game as well? Are you planning to have like use those data as input as well to update the game itself?
Yeah, so I mean, those were mostly envisioned as output devices, as you said. Mm-hmm. We did not so much look into designing input devices like controllers. Mm-hmm. But what we did recently is that we basically looked, so those were also rather like post-play visualizations. Yeah, mm-hmm. So that it presented the data after the fact. And we are also like looking into ways of how we can use those tangible devices during play, mm-hmm. like the battle grid I have shown. Mm-hmm. So we are doing a little bit more work in that direction now, to basically present more live feedback while they are playing, mm-hmm. To help them understand the gameplay a little bit better.
Because I mean, from awareness to action would be very interesting as well. As a child, I can feel, I can be aware of my emotions. Then how I am going to represent them, and how the game is going to adapt to my feelings. That will be also an interesting loop itself. I think, yeah. I mean, it's very exciting. There are lots of things to do, I think.
Yeah, thank you.
And the other one is that, I mean, you focused mainly on empowering the players by giving them more data and helping them and so on. From your observations and also like the end of the results of the questionnaires, are there any lessons to empower, or at least for the betterment of the designers as well? I mean, are there any lessons that you have noticed the way the players are responding to those cues?
I mean, I think I presented some when I talked about the training. So I think like one of the main things to have to be aware of this is that you do not distract the player. So, and I think that's quite a difficulty, because at the same time you want to convey something, so players need to look at something, but on the other hand you do not want them to distract from the actual play. And I think that's a thin line, because that you need to strike that balance, and that's quite difficult in some sense. And like, it's really about presenting the right data at the right moment. So like, because like gaming is quite context dependent, and so at some point some data may be more or less relevant in another instance. So it's important to figure out basically when something is important and when it's not important. So those are always these are all like tricky questions, and which also like depend a little bit on the game, of course. And so I think like user studies are really important to gather those requirements before starting out to design something.
Thank you so much, Günter. I know that this has been a very busy week for you, and I would like to congratulate you for the KaiPlay 2021 as well. It was a great organization, and Günter was a co-chair in that conference. And I would like to thank you again for accepting our invitation in such a busy week, and thank you so much for this very interesting presentation.
Many thanks for the invitation. It was a real pleasure to talk today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
We thank Dr. Sürer for joining us today. We will continue with our next talk after a couple of research lab presentations.
Merhaba, adım Deniz Cansel Kahraman. Bilkent Üniversitesi Moleküler Biyoloji ve Genetik bölümünü tamamladıktan sonra doktora eğitiminde orada devam ettim. Daha sonrasında doktora sonrası araştırmalarım için Kansil'e katıldım. Şu anda Kansil'de öğretim görevlisiyim. Bu süreçte karaciğer kanseri üzerine farklı çalışmalar yaptım. Öncelikle karaciğer kanseri için yeni ilaç keşfi, karaciğer kanserinin dirençli olduğu durumlar için mekanizmaların çalışılması, kök hücreler üzerinde, kanser kök hücreler üzerinde bazı çalışmalar yaptım. Kansil'de araştırmalarımızı gerçekleştirirken informatik alanında farklı uygulamalardan da faydalanıyoruz. Özellikle birlikte çalıştığımız bu konuda uzman hocalarımız ile derin öğrenme ve yapay zeka ile geliştirilen araçlardan elde edilen sonuçların ıslak laboratuvar çalışmaları ile doğrulanması ve bu araçların geliştirilmesi için gerekli gen ifade analizi verilerinin sağlanması aşamalarında laboratuvarımız önemli bir yere sahip. Şu anda bulunduğum laboratuvarımızda karaciğer kanseri hücre hatlarıyla yaptığımız sitotoksisite analizleri ve hücresel boyutta yapılan analizleri destekleyen bir altyapımız bulunmakta. Hücre kültürü, hücre büyümesi veya göçü tayin edebilen gerçek zamanlı hücre analiz sistemleri, akış sitometri, floresan aktive hücre ayırıcı, floresan ve gerçek zamanlı mikroskopi cihazları bu altyapının en önemli parçaları. Laboratuvarımızda hem biyoinformatik alanında hem de biyolojik bilimlerde yüksek lisans yapan öğrenciler ile çalışmalar yapıyoruz.
Merhaba, ben Esra Nalba. Enstitümüzün Sağlık Bilişimi programında doktora çalışmalarımı yürütmekteyim. Aynı bölümde araştırma görevlisi olarak çalışmaktayım. Karaciğer kanserine karşı yeni ilaç adaylarının keşfini hedefleyen Kansil'de özellikle hali hazırda farklı kanser türleri ve başka hastalıklarda kullanılan ilaçların karaciğer kanseri için yeniden konumlandırılması konusunda çalışmalar yapmaktayım. Makine öğrenmesine dayalı gerçekleştirilen ilaç hedef tahmin araçlarının geliştirilmesi ve doğrulanması yönünde çalışmalar son dönemde oldukça önemli hale geldi. ilaç keşfinin yalnızca laboratuvar çalışmaları ile oldukça uzun zaman ve yüksek bütçeleriyle gerçekleştirilmesi problemine çözüm sunabilecek bu yaklaşım ile karaciğer kanseri gibi oldukça agresif ve dirençli olan kanser türlerine karşı etkili olabilecek ilaçları ya da ilaç formülasyonlarını keşfetmeyi hedeflemekteyim. Bunun yanı sıra işbirliği yaptığımız laboratuvarlar tarafından geliştirilen ve karaciğer kanserinde fazlaca aktif olduklarını bildiğimiz sinyal yolaklarında etkili olabileceği düşünülen ilaç adaylarının moleküler mekanizmalarının aydınlatılması için preklinik deneylerine devam etmekteyim.
Merhaba, ben Altay Koyaş. ODTÜ Informatik Enstitüsü Sağlık Bilişimi Anabilim Dalı doktora öğrencisiyim. Doktora çalışmalarım dahilinde karaciğer kanseri üzerinde etkili olabilecek yeni ilaç aday moleküllerinin validasyonu ve modellemesi üzerine çalışma yapmaktayım. Bugün sizlere kanser genom laboratuvarı hakkında biraz bilgi vermek istiyorum. Bulunduğumuz laboratuvarda yoğunlukla gen ifade analizi ile ilgili çalışmalara ağırlık veriyoruz. Kanser genom olarak da bilinen bu laboratuvarımız, nükleik asit, saflık ve konsantrasyon ölçüm cihazları, gerçek zamanlı kantitatif PCR, Türkiye'de bulunan iki sistemden biri olan NanoString Encounter analiz sistemi ve primer hücre kültürü çalışmaları için bir alana sahip. Karaciğer kanseri üzerinde bilinen ve yeni ilaç adaylarının RNA, DNA ve protein düzeyinde meydana getirdikleri değişimlere bağlı olarak etki mekanizmalarının anlaşılması için kullandığımız NanoString sistemi oldukça hassas, yeni nesil nanoteknolojik bir platform.
Merhaba, ben ODTÜ Kanser Laboratuvarı'ndan proje destek uzmanı Tuğçe Gülokşaklı. Bugün sizlere kanser bünyesinde yapmış olduğumuz FDA onaylı prosikna testinden bahsedeceğim. Yeni nesil prognostik meme kanseri testi olarak da bilinen bu testi Türkiye'de gerçekleştirebilen ikinci laboratuvarız. Hastaların meme kanseri türünün doğru belirlenmesi ve tedavi protokolünün belirlenmesi için oldukça etkili bir test. Ve bu testten NanoString sisteminden yardım almaktayız. Bu sistem ile kişinin genetik profili üzerinden hastalığın tekrarlama olasılığı hesaplanabilmekte ve buna bağlı olarak kemoterapi ve tedavi süreci şekillendirilebilmektedir.
METU's Special Audio Research Group was founded in 2013 to consolidate the audio signal processing research activities at the Graduate School of Informatics. It is the first and still the only research group in Turkey that is dedicated to audio and acoustical signal processing. The research group hosts the METU Spark Audio Lab, which is a purpose-built facility for audio and acoustics research. Between 2013 and 2021, there had been 1 doctoral and 10 master's graduates from the research group, and these students were from different departments from within the Graduate School of Informatics and not only Multimedia Informatics department. Currently, the membership of the research group includes 5 doctoral students and 10 master's students. The current research teams within the group include acoustic source separation and dereverberation, an algorithm that we developed recently became a part of the MPI-K standard. We do work on object-based audio, on acoustics-informed robot navigation. We recently started working on 6 degrees of freedom immersive audio capture and rendering. We do work on room acoustics modeling and simulation, including artificial reverberators, specifically for games and virtual environments. We do work on microphone array design. We sometimes design and build our own microphone arrays. for our research. And finally, we work on the cognitive aspects of spatial auditory perception. We do collaborate with researchers and research groups from around the world. We do collaborate with King's College London and University of Surrey from the UK. We do work together with Stanford University, Karma. We started collaborating with Microflow Technologies in the Netherlands and Meso Studio in Turkey. With Microflow Technologies, we work on microphone array design, and with Meso Studio, we work on coupled volume room acoustics, simulation, and modeling of coupled volume acoustics. We also work with arts institutions and music schools. We do work with the School of Music of Başkent University in Ankara, and we also work with the Presidential Symphony Orchestra. Last but not least, we do contribute to standardization efforts within the recently founded Moving Pictures Audio and Data Coding with Artificial Intelligence, AMPI, which is a standardization body. So this was about MeteoSpark. Hope you will enjoy the rest of the presentations for the anniversary talks. Thank you.
In modern times, we are transferring more and more of our lives to online platforms, which comes with many security risks. To address such concerns, we have a cybersecurity department in our institute. For the next session, I would like to invite Assistant Professor Dr. Cihangir Tezcan, the head of Cybersecurity Department, to introduce our next speakers.
Welcome, everybody. It is my great honor and pleasure to introduce Bart Preneel. I'm sure everybody in our field knows you, but I would like to introduce you to our audience. Professor Preneel is a full professor at the Catholic University of Leuven. His main research interests are cryptography, information security, and privacy. He is the head of COSIG Research Group, which stands for the Computer Security and Industrial Cryptography. This group was founded in 1979, and in the last 15 years, they actually turned the Belgian town of Leuven into a pilgrimage site for cryptographers. He has authored more than 400 scientific publications, invented 5 patents, participated to more than 50 research projects sponsored by the European Commission. He has served as project manager of the European Network of Excellence, ECRYPT, which brought together more than 250 researchers in the area of cryptology. And this project was very important for the European cryptographic community. And from 2008 to 2013, he served as the president of IACR, which stands for International Association for Cryptographic Research. Actually, many young cryptographers first met him during his presidency at IACR, and during those IACR meetings, many of us were amazed how democratically the decisions were made under his presidency. In 2015, he was elected as fellow of the IACR. He received many awards. I think the most recent one was from Computable, and he received the IT Person of the Year award. And since the beginning of the pandemic, Professor Preneel focused on the privacy of the applications about COVID-19, and he is the technical lead of the development of the Belgian Corona Alert app that has been downloaded more than 3 million times. And today, Professor Preneel is going to talk about on general trends in security and privacy. Thank you again for being here today with us. We are excitedly waiting your talk. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Cihangir, for the nice introduction. And I wish I could be with you in person today. I also saw the weather in Metu is much better than it is in Belgium. Here it's 11 degrees and raining. But I hope that after the pandemic, I will have an occasion to visit in the future. So I first want to congratulate the Institute with its birthday. And I think it's also fantastic to be part of this event with so many distinguished speakers. I'm very humbled to be invited to speak at your event. So today I wanted to discuss at a high level trends in security and privacy, where we see things going. It's of course very difficult to make predictions, especially of the future, but we'll still try to identify some trends and reflect on what it brings to society and also what it brings in terms of research challenges. So a first trend is the fact that the IoT is now finally happening, and it does make IT, information technology, more intrusive. So the term IoT was coined in 1999, so almost 22 years ago. So IoT has now grown up. And of course, IoT means that you connect all the objects to the internet. It means that we actually have connected cars, connected homes, connected factories, and even connected cities. So we put many computers everywhere and we connect them all to the internet. If you look at the graph on the right, it's a bit small, but it shows you that finally there is now more computers on the IoT than there are on the regular internet, the one we use with our laptops and smartphones. So for 2021, the forecast is about, in total, 24 billion devices on the internet, of which 14 billion are IoT devices and 10 billion are, I would say, human-owned or devices connected to people. So the IoT is finally happening. The growth is slower than predicted, but it's still, as you see, the numbers keep going up. And so IoT is becoming a reality. Now, of course, the IoT means that computers are disappearing into the environment. This is now finally happening. And of course, this brings privacy risks because it means we no longer see the computers and the computers will interact with us, but we actually don't see them and we don't have a choice anymore. So in Europe, we have a very strong privacy regime, the GDPR, that actually says we can only process data when it's necessary for functioning or for maybe national interests or maybe for health interests or public interests. But in general, if you don't fall under the general categories, you can only process data with consent. Now, the problem with these IoT devices is you don't even see them and they're integral part of the environment. So imagine that you have a smart city, which means you put sensors and cameras everywhere. Does it then mean that if you enter the city, you actually give consent? Or do you argue that it's essential to operate a city to actually process all the data? So I think it actually forms an interesting challenge with GDPR regime that now computers are built in everywhere and it's even hard to detect when our privacy violated because we don't see the computers anymore. Of course, the threat landscape is changing. Cybersecurity is becoming more and more important. While I guess when I started in this field of cryptology and security in the 80s, most of the hacking was done by, I would say, amateurs, so people who were bored and wanted to improve their computing skills or show off how good they were. As soon as we got business online in the 90s, people started buying and selling things and businesses started interacting. We got organized crime trying to find out how to make money online. And more recently, we also saw hacktivists trying to get attention for their specific goals through online hacking. What has received more attention, I would say, in the last 10 years is the fact that also now nation states and state-sponsored actors are actually hacking devices. We'll come back to this. So it means that the stakes are much higher, the opponents are much more sophisticated, and it's really affecting society to a much larger extent than it did 10 or 20 years ago. So you just have to look at the press to know that the IoT will bring security risks. If we put computers everywhere, it also means that we have vulnerabilities everywhere, and so these can be exploited. So back in 2007, US Vice President Cheney got a pacemaker implanted, and he actually learned that these pacemakers at that time already had wireless interfaces to read out parameters and to update parameters. And he was very concerned about the fact that maybe terrorists would reprogram his pacemaker and kill him this way with a perfect crime. So he insisted that the wireless interface was disabled. So in the last years, we've also been doing quite some research in our lab on medical devices in collaboration with the university hospital. And so we get devices that are explanted from people who passed away. I mean, in the beginning, the question was, will we be able to hack the device? But after a while, it was clear that we can hack every device. And the question is not, will we be able to hack the device, but actually, does it take a few weeks or a few days or a few hours, which is where we are today. So I actually gave a talk to some cardiologists, and I say, well, if I ever get a pacemaker, I want the wireless interface disabled, like Dick Cheney because I think it's really too risky that people will in the future start hacking this device. And the answer of the cardiologist was, well, we understand your concern, but you should be aware that about 2% of the pacemakers stop working at some time because they have defects. And so if there is no wireless interface, we cannot actually diagnose this. So it's kind of a very tough choice you have to make. Expose yourself to a defective pacemaker and have health problem at this reason, or expose yourself to a hack. So we hope that the security of these devices will improve. Other example that, again, these examples are old, but we do have more recent ones as well. But in 2015, this is the first electricity grid of Ukraine was being hacked. It was also brought down 1 year later, presumably by Russian hackers. So this is the first example of critical infrastructure of a country being hacked by another nation state, using actually, in this case, IT devices to go after OT devices, operational technology. Also, 6 years ago, there was research on car security. It started a bit earlier, but people started taking apart modern cars and finding out that actually it's possible to take control. And a high-profile case was this journalist who didn't quite believe the researchers, and to demonstrate this, they actually took full control of his car and sent the car with him in there into a ditch. And then in 2016, we had the Mirai botnet. That's kind of the opposite story. So the previous examples are IoT-style devices that are being hacked. Here, and actually as a target, here you see the opposite in the Mirai botnet. The IoT devices are being hacked, but then to use as an instrument to create a botnet to bring down other servers, to bring down actually part of the internet service in the US. So even if your devices are not secure, it doesn't affect only you, it affects the overall ecosystem. So we should all care about security of IoT devices. So our experiences have not been improved. For the Belgian Consumer Organization, our lab received in the beginning of the summer a number of devices, and we were told we could spend only a few hours to look at each of them. There were smart TVs, door locks, and so on, and we managed to hack all of them even within a few hours. So the situation has not improved in the last years. That's the bad news. So why is this the case? Is it because we don't know how to secure things? I think there is a lot of research being done how to build secure systems, and Metu is working on this, also COSIC, but many other labs and companies. But I think if you, in the market of IoT devices, in fact, it's unclear whether you're actually responsible. If you sell somebody a car, it has to be secure, and the brakes have to be tested, and the lights have to be properly functioning, have to be well adjusted. But for IoT devices, actually, it's not clear who is responsible. Is it the hardware producer? Is it the software producer or the firmware producer, or is it the one who makes the whole device and sets it in the box? So it's quite unclear. There is also something called the market for lemons. So a lemon is not a fruit, but a lemon is a US term for a second car. And this is a very special type of second-hand car. It's a car that looks very shiny. And what happens if you buy it, typically for not too high price, you drive it off the parking lot, and after the first turn, the fender falls off. And if you take it a few days later on the freeway for a spin, then actually what happens is the engine burns down because the car was in an accident or had serious defects. The problem is that you can't see this. And so such a car in the US is called a lemon. And the problem is that a non-expert user can't tell a good second-hand car, which has been taken care of, and the one which actually was in an accident or was actually very badly maintained. And so as a user, you can't tell whether you get a good car or a lemon. And as a consequence, you're not willing to pay a very high price for a used car. You only want to pay a couple of $1,000s because you may as well be back in a few days or weeks to buy another one. And so this is known as a market for lemons. So if you can't judge as consumer the quality, you're actually not willing to pay the price. And so we have the same phenomenon in IoT security, or in general in security of IT systems. It requires a lot of effort by experts to tell secure devices from insecure devices, and the average user cannot tell the difference. So as a consequence, the user is not willing to pay for security. And as a consequence of that, the vendor is not willing to invest in security. And so you end up with a failed market because you get no better security because the vendors don't invest and the consumers actually don't have a good option. The other problem is also been identified as an economic reason for IoT security failures is tragedy of the commons. So in general, people don't want to invest for the problem of somebody else. So the commons in an English village is a central area where people could put their sheep or their cows to eat some grass. And this was a common area for everybody. But of course, what people sometimes did was they put all their sheep on there, they ate all the grass, and then they disappeared. So some person took advantage of the whole thing, had free food for the animals, and then the rest are left behind with a mud field. And so we have something similar in security. In general, people are not willing to invest to make a more secure ecosystem. And this holds for providers of software and hardware, but also for ISP providers. So in general, we're all in there for the benefits, but we don't want to invest in security because it doesn't affect us directly. So very often, if you make a system more secure, it's not you who benefit directly, it's actually other players, and so you get a misalignment of security investments. So how you can solve this, of course, is with regulation, but this is very complex because a lot of the industry doesn't want to see regulation. With certification, but again, certification is a very complex problem because it means that you have to find a cost-effective way to separate secure from insecure products. And this is very hard. We have to work more on this because at this moment, what industry is using certification is common criteria, and it's very expensive, slow, and ineffective. So this is, I think, an interesting research challenge. I still think that in 20 years from now, we will look back at 2021 in the same way as we look today at this Chevrolet Corvair from 1961. So it's a car that's now 60 years old. It looks very beautiful, very stylishly designed, beautiful color, also nice color of the house. So it looks like a very attractive car, but then you go look inside, you will find out that there is no seat belts, there is no ESP, there is no ABS, there is no safety features. And actually, if you end up in an accident, what will happen is that the metal pin of the steering wheel will actually pierce the driver into his seat forever. So I think this is a bit how our systems will look in 20 years. So today we look at these cars and we wonder, like, how could people build such cars? They look very shiny, but they're actually highly insecure. And I think in 20 years, people will look at our systems today and say, how could we do this? How could we build such laptops and webcams? And how could we put on the market such cars with so bad security features? How could we do this ever? So this is call for action, and it's not only technology, it's also finding a legal component, but also for researchers, the question is, how can we, for a low, reasonable cost, certify security so we can convince consumers which devices are secure or not secure? The second trend, again, a trend that is old already, a decade, which is big data, which we can collect ever more data. But unfortunately, we see that we also have ever bigger breaches. And as humanity, we're very optimistic. We always think that things will go fine, but of course, we always have big incidents. We have burning oil platforms. We have Fukushima for nuclear power. We had 2008, a financial system breaking down. So as humans, we build these huge systems, and then we kind of surprised that actually these systems can collapse and can fail in ways we didn't anticipate. So today, for convenience and performance, we actually store our data in the cloud. This is highly convenient because it means that if your smartphone dies, you just buy a new smartphone and you have all your data again, all your pictures, all your contacts, all your information is there. Also for companies, of course, outsourcing infrastructure is much more flexible and much more cost effective than managing everything yourself. But I guess we should be reminded of the statement that the cloud is someone else's computing. So in some sense, you're no longer in charge. If your data is in the cloud, your cloud is actually a computer operated by somebody else. And if your data is there, you're no longer in full control. The second principle we have in our IT world is that market share is more important than security. And also we try to offer free services where users pay with their data. So if you actually do a search instruction, or you store your data in a cloud as a consumer, or use a social network, you don't pay the provider of this service, you actually pay with your data. And so this has been phrased as by Andrew Lewis as follows: if you're not paying for something, you're not a customer, you're the product being sold. Now, when we think of this, we very often think of the large players, the Google, Facebook, and Microsoft players, who make indeed tens of billions of dollars with advertising income. But what many of us are not aware is that, in fact, there is a much more complex ecosystem in addition to all those large companies. On the left side, you have the marketing, the people who want to show advertisement. On the right side, we have the publishers. This is people who produce content like newspapers or other websites with content. And so there is a whole complex ecosystem of hundreds of companies that analyze our data and try to optimize delivery of ads to consumers. And these companies are appearing and disappearing all the time. They're being merged and so on. So, but all these companies are processing our personal data. And so, of course, in the EU with GDPR, you have the right to know who has your data, for which purpose, and so on. But in practice, it's almost impossible to even find out which these companies are and what they're exactly doing. But this is more or less what we've created, a kind of monster. We've created a complex system that is necessary to make sure that we can get all these free services. But free means we actually pay with our data. And some people have said, well, data is the new oil. It's actually our data that makes the economy turn. This trend in big data goes even further in medical data. If you look at DNA, what you see here is the cost to sequence human DNA. And so you may remember that this was a very big milestone. It was first achieved 20 years ago, and the cost was several tens of millions of dollars. And so as you see, these costs have dropped dramatically. So in the white, you see Moore's law, which would mean a cost reduction by a factor 2 every 18 months. But you see in practice, actually, sequencing the human DNA now costs less than $1,000. So there is an enormous reduction in cost, way faster than Moore's law, which of course will revolutionize science in the future because we will be able to have better healthcare and better understand our bodies. There is, of course, risk associated with this. There is quite some websites already and companies that do DNA tests and that promise to assert your risk for certain diseases that can be in your DNA. It can also be used to determine your ancestry. And of course, it has already been discovered that police use these now to find out or solve cold crime cases. But I think a very big risk is also what about insurance companies? Because if they would have actually this data, they could, of course, abuse it to deny insurance to some people. And DNA makes a very good point because you can, of course, argue as a citizen, well, it's my decision whether or not I share my data with one of those companies and whether I want to know certain things about my DNA. But of course, the problem is that if you put your data there, it also reveals information about your relatives. And this is how crimes are solved. Of course, people who are serial killers don't tend to upload their DNA to these servers, but some of their relatives tend to do this. And this is how they get caught. So there is benefits for society. But the point I want to make is that actually uploading your data there presents not only a risk for you, but presents a risk also for other people. And there is benefits, but there is also serious risks we have to think about. So one of the risks is that this data will be lost. So it seems that we've now decided that the most convenient way to process data is to store it with live servers in the cloud and have all our analysis done there. This is how businesses operate. This is how we as consumers work with our data. What we tend to forget is that many of these services tend to get breached. And I recommend that you look at this website. It's called Information is Beautiful. There is many nice visualizations, and one of them shows all the data breaches. And I only showed you the last couple of years. It actually goes further. And you see here bubbles. And the bigger the bubble, the bigger the data set being lost. So the record, I think, is the Indian data set from India, from the voters or the citizens, is 1.1 billion. But you see also several breaches of Facebook of 400 million, 500 million, and so on. So more or less, your data has already been breached several times. If you're a user of some of these services, some of the hotels, sometimes it's the government, it can also be healthcare providers. We actually seem to be losing billions and billions of data items all the time. And of course, this can be used for intelligence purposes, but also for crime purposes, and to violate people's privacy. In particular, I think the presence of medical data and government data is very concerning. It's not only a privacy problem because the Office of Personnel Management of the US also lost this data, and the OPM, as it's called, it contains the data of everybody who has a security clearance in the US. It's several million people, and it contains, of course, their name and their address, a social security number, the languages they speak, what they studied, but of course also their relation problems, their health problems, maybe their drug or alcohol problems. So highly sensitive data exactly of the people who are in charge of security of a country. So it shows that these breaches are not only problematic in terms of privacy of people and security of a citizen, in the sense that you want to trust your government or trust these organizations, but they actually can have also major implications on the security of a country or society at large. So I think that in 20 years from now, again, we will think of big data today and the big data hype a bit as we look at pollution today. So when I grew up, the rivers in my country were completely polluted because of the industrial boom after World War II. And there was quite some smog. There was even more smog, for example, in London than in Belgium, but there was quite some smog. At this moment, the smog is clearing. We still have a little bit of, we still have particles pollution, which is much harder to see. But at least we're making progress cleaning up our rivers. And we're thinking now, what were we thinking in the 50s and 60s to dump all our chemicals and to have very polluting cars and to actually ruin our environment? I think something similar we are doing now with big data. I think this is how we should look at this. We're polluting the environment with all our data. And we're, of course, attracted by all the value, but we forget that this data will be breached and can be abused. I gave already one example. Another example is an application that was run about 10 years ago by researchers on Facebook. And this application computed based on your data available in Facebook to which percentage somebody was gay. So this was decided based on your friends, based on the bars or restaurants you liked, based on the books you read, based on the movies you liked, and so on. So for everybody, a percentage was identified. And of course, it's highly unethical research because some people are gay but don't want to out themselves. And so this tool actually outed people against their will because it actually was possible for everybody to determine this number. And unfortunately, this number was quite accurate. So again, this makes the same point that you can say, well, I'm not gay. I have nothing to hide. Well, by sharing your data in the social network, it actually is possible for other parties to separate or identify minorities and to actually harm them. And so again, privacy should not be seen as an individual decision. What do I share or what do I not share? It's actually a collective decision. If we all pollute the world with our data, actually we create harm for the weakest in society. And so I think that's another way of thinking of this. We should try to get rid of this, and I'll come back for solutions later. A third thing is that actually we now use AI a lot also for security. AI is another of the buzzwords together with IoT and big data. And so if you go to security conferences and you listen to vendors, again, for the last 5 to 10 years, they say we have to use big data and AI for security. So how does that work? Well, they say, well, we now have these billions of devices. This means every company may have been managing hundreds, thousands or millions of devices. So at least you have to have full control and visibility. You have to have a SOC, Secure Operations Center. You have to look at all your devices so you know who's talking to whom, what's being sent. You have to have a complete monitoring of all your system. Because if you can't see everything all the time, how can you keep it secure? That's the first step. Then, of course, comes the argument that, well, securing a device is really expensive, as we saw before. There is no real market for this. It's too hard to do. So rather than trying to build secure devices and making secure networks, let's just keep things insecure as they are, but watch everybody all the time. It's a bit the same argument that you would say if you want to secure a university campus, you could put, of course, a high wall around it. And the case with entrance, check the control with entrance and badges for students and staff to get in. You could, of course, also put cameras everywhere and to monitor everywhere in every corridor, every building, every parking lot, put cameras and watch everybody all the time. And so you just will identify those people who behave suspiciously. So that's the idea. Rather than making secure devices and secure networks, you just monitor everything. So you focus on monitoring rather than on putting in defense. But then, of course, if you do this for a campus, you already will have thousands of cameras. So you cannot hire hundreds of security guards to watch these cameras. So you then want to use AI, artificial intelligence, to actually learn what is good behavior and bad behavior and actually try to keep the bad guys out by automatically identifying them. Sounds very interesting. It's not clear this is going to work, but this is the approach industry is taking today. It's, of course, highly privacy violating. And the smartest bad guys, of course, will make sure that they adapt their behavior, and they will also use AI to make sure that they behave in a way that the other AI can't detect. And then the other AI will improve again. And so what we will see in the next decade is the war of the AIs. So you have AI systems trying to attack and defend each other. And we as users, we will just be there, and all our data will be monitored all the time in the IT system, because that's what needed to make the whole system secure. It's a bit dystopian. So in general, what we get, and of course, what I haven't focused on so far is that we will get more and more devices in our body as well. This is again something we can foresee in the next 10 years. So we first had a mainframe in the building, then we got in the 80s desktop, in the 90s we got a laptop, in the zeros we got a smartphone in our pocket, and now we get smartwatches, and of course the next step will be to have implantable devices, which will be there to monitor our wellness and our health. But of course it also means that we are more and more monitored. On the other hand, also technology gets better and better, cameras, AI, and so on. So more or less you see that an increasing number of governments is putting cameras everywhere together with intelligence to monitor behavior of people, and there is no way to escape anymore. And this seems a new model of security. It was first applied to networks, and the next paradigm will be that it will be applied to people. Now, AI is great, of course, and I mean, I point here to the privacy risks. Also, AI by itself is a technology that has privacy and security risks. I guess security risks are obvious. If you could hack the AI, you could actually make the wrong decisions, and the bad guys could be left unidentified. There is also quite some privacy concerns, apart from the ones I mentioned, which is that these systems could be used in the wrong way. So, for example, it has been noted that if you have a large AI model, that actually, if you analyze this, you can identify individual training data in this model. Of course, models themselves could be stolen, and that could be the property. There has also been quite some research in the last decade on algorithmic fairness. So if you want to read about this, I recommend you the book Weapons of Math Destruction. It actually discusses this problem, that if you have a lot of data and then you train it with AI, you don't always end up with a system that actually is fair, because there is bias in your data, and your system may end up with very strange decisions. So examples are of this bias are some courts in the US that used actually AI to determine sentences. And it turns out, of course, that these courts sentenced Black people to much higher sentences for the same crime than white people. And this is, of course, based on the algorithm, but it's not because an algorithm computes something actually that it is fair. A more extreme example is this algorithm implemented by Google that managed to recognize objects. This is something we achieved with deep learning in the last decade. So 20 years ago, it was not feasible to have an algorithm identify objects. But then when this algorithm was applied to people, it turned out that actually Black people were identified as apes or as gorillas. And it's actually quite shocking to show you that AI can make mistakes because of bias in the data or because of biased training data, and bias in the way the algorithm converges. A bit more recently, but still 7 years ago, people discovered that actually it's very easy to fool AI algorithms. So we have now very powerful deep learning, but what you see here on the left is a number of pictures of a school bus on top left, and of a dog on bottom right, and some other pictures in between. It turns out that for each of those pictures, you can carefully craft some noise, and as a consequence, all of what you get is the right picture. So in the middle, you see a bit of noise, and on the right, you see a slightly modified picture that to our eyes as humans still looks like a bus and like a dog. But if you give it to the AI algorithm, to the neural network, it will say that they're all an ostrich. So they will all be recognized as an ostrich, whether it's a dog or a minivan. So it's possible to distort the image in a very specific way, such that actually the outcome can be any other category. In this case, an ostrich was chosen. This sounds like, well, interesting. There is some problem there, but in fact, it's quite dramatic, because we want to move towards autonomous driving. And a very important element there is that, of course, these cars can recognize objects like pedestrians and bicycles, but also traffic signs. And several modern cars today already have automated recognition of traffic signs, and they will show those traffic signs to a human driver. Human driver can still correct, but if you show it to a computer, to a robot, it will actually act based on this. And what you see here is an example of really shocking. So you see, of course, something that we all recognize as stop sign, but the AI researchers put a small sticker on it. And as a consequence, the stop sign is recognized with very high probability, about 95%, as a speed limit. So in fact, the autonomous car will see this sign and will drive through this stop sign at a speed of 50 kilometers per hour, because it really believes that this stop sign is a sign that says 50 kilometers per hour allowed here. So there is still quite some research going on to try to solve this, but it's a very challenging problem because we don't fully understand how deep learning algorithms work and fail. I mean, they have been so far an amazing success because we had large data sets available and a lot of computational power available. But so the adversarial problems show that we don't fully understand how to make them work and how to make them robust. So we should not rely too much on AI for our security and privacy, and we should also understand the shortcomings of this. The fourth trend looks a bit more towards the future. So unless you've been living on a different planet, you definitely have heard of quantum computers. Again, some concept that's 40 years old, coined by Yuri Mamin in Russia and Richard Feynman in the US. And so they were trying to simulate physical processes. And these processes in physics are very complex because we have quantum physics. And so it turns out that it's highly computationally intensive to make predictions about physical objects in physics, quantum objects with a classical computer because they behave in a very strange way. And so they had the idea of building a computer based on the principles of quantum physics to actually mostly model quantum physics processes. This would be really nice for the people in physics to make predictions. And for example, that could lead to better molecules, better medicine, because medicine depends on predicting how molecules will behave. And so a quantum computer would be extremely suitable at this. And so people started to build these things. First, in the 90s, 1-bit computers. What you see here is a picture which is 20 years old, a computer built in Stanford. At that time, it was the largest quantum computer. It was a 7-bit computer built in 2001. This computer was actually not used to model some physical processes, but it was used to factor. And it actually was managing to factor 15 in 5 times 3, which doesn't seem to us like a major achievement. But of course, at the time, it was a real breakthrough because it was the first 7-bit quantum computer that actually could do some calculations. So this was based on the work of Shor. So Peter Shor in '94 showed that actually quantum computers would also be extremely suitable to break public key cryptography. And in particular, what we're using today, which is RSA based on factoring, and then Diffie-Hellman and discrete log variance based on discrete log in ZP and discrete log over elliptic curves. So it turns out actually that using a very clever FFT technique, a quantum computer can factor or compute discrete logs in almost linear space and very small time. And a bit later, Love Grover also showed that actually a quantum computer could search a symmetric key in the square root of the time of a classical computer. So you have halving the number of bits of security. So if you had a classical algorithm with 128-bit security against a classical computer, against a quantum computer, the security would be reduced to 64 bits. So in symmetric key, we can solve this quite easily. We just double the key length. It turns also out that the constant is very big, so it's not even clear there is any short-term implication in the next 20 or 30 years. But if we want to defend against Grover's attack, we just double the key length and we're done. For public key, this is a very different story. We have to find completely new algorithms. And indeed, we have to start worrying because the big players are getting investing in this. So Google bought a UCSB physics department building quantum computer, and they actually have a 70-bit computer. IBM has a 50-bit computer. And Rigetti has a 128-bit computer. It's not a full quantum computer, but it's still a very powerful device. Now, how far are we from factoring RSA 2048 or maybe RSA 1024? Well, to factor RSA 1024, which is a little bit beyond state of the art. I mean, we now use 2048, for example, in most systems. But to factor a 1024-bit number, so 330 digits, you would require 2048 ideal qubits. Now, the problem is that current quantum computers don't have ideal qubits, they have very noisy qubits. And so this means that, in fact, you would need many, many qubits, physical qubits, to actually simulate an ideal qubit. And so the current estimate is that we would need something like 1.5 million real qubits to be able to have 2048 ideal qubits and then to be able to factor RSA 10/24. So 72 or 128 is still very far from 1.5 million, so it's not going to happen next year or in 5 years, but maybe in 10 or maybe in 20 years it will be possible to do this. So today we actually have massive use of public key cryptography, for example, to secure the web, TLS, secure Signal, to secure WhatsApp, to secure all our software updates. So you should actually start thinking about getting rid of our current public key cryptography, replacing it by new algorithms. But so the question is, when should we do this? And for this, we were going to use some mathematics. It's Friday evening, so I'll be short with the mathematics. And a very simple linear equation. So you first have to make a guess how long it will take until the first large quantum computer will be built. So maybe we think it's going to take a while, and we say it's 2040. So we think it still will be 19 years away. Then we can look at how long it will take to switch to new algorithms. And of course, we first have to finalize the algorithm. Then we have to produce a standard. Then we have to implement the standard. And then we have to deploy the standard. And so it depends a bit on the field where you look. In some areas on the internet, we can deploy things in a few years. But if you look at embedded devices, it can take up to 10 to 12 years before you can upgrade something. Because, for example, upgrading the algorithms used in a car, this is problematic because cars in general are not designed to upgrade their crypto algorithms. They're stuck in there, and it's expected that they will last a lifetime of a car, say 20 years. And then the third question is, how long do you want your data to be confidential? Because you're encrypting data, and this you can assume that your data will be stored. We know that some governments, like the US government, massively collect data, and if they can't read it because it's encrypted, they actually store it in a large data center in the hope that they will be able to decrypt it in the future. So in Utah, there is such a data center for the NSA where all encrypted communication are being stored, just in case they can break it in the future. So now we come to Moscow's equation. So given Q, X, and Y, I have to start switching to quantum resistant cryptography in the year 2021 plus Q, so as many years it takes to get a computer, minus X, as many years to complete the switch, and minus Y, the number of years my data has to be confidential. So I have the example already below. If I plug in Q20, X10, and Y10, it means I should actually start switching today, which is problematic because there is no ready-made standards available today. So we actually have to start worrying and hurry up a bit. There have been some efforts. This is a more technical slide. I will not say too much, but so the US government has run an open competition to which they got 82 submissions in two categories, encryption and signing, so for privacy and for authentication of data. As you can see, the biggest category was lapises, and there is now 5 schemes left after 3 rounds in the finals. There is 1 code-based scheme left. There is actually 1 multivariate scheme is left, but it has been shown to be weak at last Eurocrypt, this week actually. There is no hash-based scheme left, but we must say that there is a fallback scheme, and there is already an IETF standard, so there is a hash-based signature, and all the other schemes were broken. So more or less, it was a ruthless competition running over a couple of years, and the outcome is that actually we only are left with some lattice-based schemes and some 1 code-based scheme and a hash-based signature. So from the 82 schemes, very few have remained, but we do believe we have some solid candidates. So that's the good news. The bad news is we now have to finalize this and get this rolled out in the next 5 to 10 years, which is a major challenge for cryptography because we have to redesign many things because these algorithms are quite different from what we have today. The last trend I already hinted at is that we get a new adversarial model in security and privacy. So nation states are actually now involved. It's no longer hackers or organized crime. It's now nation states. And in the largest nations, they have thousands and thousands of people who are trying to hack systems. So when Snowden released his documents 2013, he said the slogan of the NSA is collect it all, which was not so surprising because we knew that the NSA was massively intercepting data. This was obvious from other documents, but they also apply AI to learn, so and analyze it, know it all, and exploit it all. And this last aspect was new. I don't think we were aware before the Snowden leaks that the NSA was doing so much hacking. So exploiting not mean exploiting information, it means exploiting systems, hacking systems to get access to more information. So another important lesson we learned from Snowden is that actually you have in society, you have users, industry, and government, and depending on where you live, you may trust industry or government more. So, but there is a balance of power between those three players. So in Europe, for example, I think people tend to trust their government more, but distrust industry a bit. In the US, it's the other way around. So what we then have is a privacy regime that actually controls industry, and maybe you also have a constitution that limits government. And so you try to use laws to control what industry and government can do, because in this relationship, the user, of course, the citizen is the weak party. Now, industry is changing a lot. We have big data, we have Internet of Things, we have the advertising ecosystem. This has been described by Shoshana Zuboff as surveillance capitalism. So we're actually being exploited in some sense. This is how industry now makes money based on our data. What we know from Snowden is that there is the PRISM program. So the PRISM program means that the government has access to the data in the cloud, to the big data, to the IoT data. The government has access to all this data. And to some extent, the government loses interest in limiting access of industry to data or limiting collection of data by industry. Because the more data industry collects, the more data the government also has. I think this is really a disadvantage for the citizens. It means that the power balance is shifting, and in a very short time, in less than 30 years, I think we had some reasonable privacy and reasonable balance. And now I think it's very hard to actually protect your essential data as a citizen against both industry and government. That's what we have achieved with technology evolution. We have many benefits, but also we have achieved this problem. So, of course, large governments like the US, UK, China, Russia, they can afford to hire large armies of hackers. If you can't do this, you can also hire companies like Hacking Team. And Hacking Team was an Italian company, or is an Italian company. And their slogan is, we believe that fighting crime should be easy. So they actually hack on behalf of government. And they sell these tools to police forces and to intelligence services. Now, we know about Hacking Team because Hacking Team was hacked. And if you go to Wikipedia, you can find the explanation. So 47 gigabytes of data was hacked, including all their tools and all their customer lists. So I invite you to go and look there who is among their customers. This was an incident a few years ago. This year in the news was NSO Group, an Israeli company, but actually managed to get control with a silent attack, so zero-click attack on a phone, and be able to read all the messages, listen to the conversations, use the video, and so on. So actually get a silent, complete control over the phone. And again, NSO Group is selling its data to many governments, of which not everybody is equally democratic. So this is how governments who don't have their own hacking team or their own hackers, they can actually buy these products and use them. Of course, people have been warning in the last decades for the militarization of cyberspace. So cyber is becoming the next dimension after the land, the sea, the air, space. So the fifth dimension for war is cyberspace. It has been mostly focusing there on collection of intelligence, so collecting data. But we're evolving, of course, towards hacking, because if you hack, you actually get full control. I mean, there is one thing to eavesdrop phone communications. You can find out a lot of data, but most of us use now more and more encryption. So if you can hack the phone, you actually get access to all the data. Plus, you can watch the camera, you can listen to the microphone, and so on. So this has been the business of intelligence agencies, but also private contractors, like I gave the examples, but also non-state actors. So some governments want deniability, and they have kind of fuzzy organizations that do the hacking on behalf of them. And if they're caught, the government claims that they have no association with them. So you end up in a very legal fuzzy area where there is kind of deniability. And it doesn't stop at just collecting data and intelligence. It actually goes further, and it means taking control and damaging systems. So a few years ago, the US government actually showed this graph, and they said, this is how many new 0 days, so these are new flaws in system we have released to the public. So we actually have helped companies, because when we found serious flaws, we have informed the companies, and 96% of the 0 days we found, we have informed the companies of those 0 days. So what they did not say is what they did with the 4% that they did not tell about. So apparently 4% of the 0 days they don't tell you, they actually hack your system. They also didn't say after how many months or years they told you. So maybe the governments have been hacking systems for months or years, and only after a very long time they tell the companies there is a flaw in your system, please fix it. So but in general, if you find a 0 day, so a serious flaw, say in iPhone or in Android, you can tell Apple or Google. and you may get $100,000, especially if it's a serious flaw. But if you really want to make money, you sell this flaw on the black market to either governments or shady organizations, and you can make 10 or 20 times the same amount. So what governments are doing is, rather than helping us to secure the infrastructure, they're actually collecting weaknesses of systems. They're not really timely informing the vendors, but they're using it to hack it. And this can go badly wrong. A good example is the SMB external blue. Sorry, eternal blue, it's a typo vulnerability. It's a Microsoft vulnerability, which was found by the NSA, Equation Group, a group at NSA called Equation Group. It was stolen from them by probably a Russian group called Shadow Brokers, and it ended up to be in WannaCry and NotPetya. So this is the big wave of ransomware attack a couple of years ago to be launched against Ukraine, NotPetya. But so NotPetya was so powerful as ransomware and as malware that actually it escaped Ukraine. The shipping company Maersk lost between $250 and $300 million because of this attack. And the FBI estimates the total damage of NotPetya around $10 billion. So very interesting. So the US government knows about the flaw in Microsoft systems. Rather than telling Microsoft they keep it for them, then they lose it to Russian hackers. The Russian hackers use it to attack Ukraine, and then it escapes from Ukraine. It actually shuts down hospitals in the UK, shipping companies all over the world, and so on. So this is more or less where we are today. It's a very worrisome development. So I don't think we can stop this, but I think as citizens, we should actually have more control. I think if you have so much power, and I think it's going to be almost impossible to take this power ever away, because governments can now take control of the electricity grid of other countries. They can take control of the hospitals. They can take control of the radar systems. So this is now more or less a bit like with nuclear warfare. So you have kind of mutually assured destruction. But I think it's very important that if you have elements of your government with so much power, you actually supervise them very strictly. Because decisions of not releasing or not informing a vendor about the 0-day can have major implications and can actually create major damage. And so I'm afraid that things will first get worse before they get better. There have been some initiatives where Microsoft, for example, asked to have a kind of Geneva Convention for cyberspace. The Geneva Convention says that you should not attack civilians in time of war. But the point Microsoft made is that in the cyber world, nation states and loose groups are attacking civilians in time of peace. Because in fact, the internet, this is our phones, our laptops, our cars, our homes, and our electricity systems. Okay, so maybe this was kind of a bit pessimistic. So I think there are actually things we can do. And I think we should probably go the area of decentralization. I'm not the first one to say this. I think the cryptocurrencies are an example, and maybe not the best example, but at least they show that it's possible to build more robust decentralized systems. So I think in general, the way the internet is built, the centralization there, the fact that we put everything in the same clouds is actually a risk. And we should probably rethink the architecture and make a more robust and decentralized architecture where we store data of citizens with citizens, and maybe make backup with our friends or our family members, so that if our server dies, we still have the data, but don't do it in a central place where intelligence services have access, and where if something goes wrong, everybody will lose everything. So rethinking architectures. As a cryptographer, of course, I have to tell you that cryptography can also play its role. It's not a miracle solution, but it can help. So cryptography is very good at protecting data communicated, like all our conversations, and stored data, like what's on our phones or on our hard disk. But the next challenge for cryptography is to store and protect data during computation. So you have your data in the cloud, but the idea is, can we actually protect data, compute on it, make sure that the computations are correct, so we don't compute things you should not compute. So there is some orbit what's being computed, but you compute on the data while they remain encrypted. And the only thing that leaks is the outcome. So I think in general, you should store less data in the cloud. If you look at the modern smartphone, it has more power than a Cray from the 80s. Yet everything we do with it, we store it in the cloud. Every picture we take is stored in the cloud. Every mail we send is stored in the cloud. This device is powerful enough to keep our data. We just have to find local mechanisms and we should try to get rid of our addiction to the cloud. We should try to find more robust distributed architectures where data stays local, because that's the only way to really control it. Second thing is a technology invented in the 80s, and which is now becoming practical, called multi-party computation. What you do there is you have multiple parties that want to compute on their data, but don't want to share their data. And so with cryptography, you can actually jointly compute some information on the data without sharing the data itself, yet you can be sure of the correctness of the computation. Or you can also use it in a different way. Rather than putting all your data in the cloud, you share your data in multiple pieces and you put every piece in a different cloud, in such a way that an individual piece doesn't leak any information. It's just a random piece of information. Only when you combine them, you get meaningful information. And with MPC, you can share your data over multiple cloud providers and then still compute on it and get the result. Not the cloud provider is ever learning what is happening. This is now being deployed for several solutions. This is no longer science fiction. There are several startups in this space that actually allow you to use the cloud in a privacy-friendly way. The price to pay is typically a high communication overhead. The other solution has a low communication overhead but high computation overhead. There you store your data in the cloud but encrypted with a special encryption mechanism so that you can still compute on it. And this is known as fully homomorphic encryption. And this was first realized by Gentry 12 years ago. But since then, at that moment, it was completely impractical. Since then, major improvements have been made. And for example, there are companies like Zama that today can already evaluate a small neural network efficiently in encrypted domain. So this is also something which we can do. So already mentioned by Siangir at the beginning. So in fact, in Europe, we rolled out a contact tracing solution developed by some researchers led by my old student, Camilla Troncoso at EPFL. So what we do there is a bit keep data local, share minimal information in the cloud, only very few and non-personal information. And based on this, we can do contact tracing. And so there is no central database with who was in contact with whom. The government cannot find out who broke the rules. It's just a local decision on the phone that allows you to tell you, yes, you have a high risk contact or a medium risk contact or no. And I think this was an amazing success. Of course, nothing was perfect. It was developed in a very short time. But we managed to actually get in half a year time about 100 million downloads in Europe, of which about 3 million in Belgium. And at European level, we managed to connect all databases in 18 countries. So actually, if you use this app, you use a Belgian app in Belgium, you will be warned about Germans in Belgium and vice versa. If you travel to Germany, the app will also work there and inform you. But I think it shows it's possible to do contact tracing, which seems to be something very intrusive, in a highly privacy-friendly way. So it's actually possible to do this. So a final element of the puzzle, I think, is to go for open solutions. So it's clear that if you look at information technology, what has happened today is if you look at your phone or your device, well, the large players know everything about you. You're in full transparency, while actually the powerful players, the governments and the GAFAMs, Google, Apple, Facebook, and so on, they're completely opaque. You don't know what they're doing with your data. If you think about society, it should be the other way around. The weak people, the citizens, should actually have privacy. And if you're very powerful, you should be transparent. And everything you do should be visible and should be justifiable and auditable. And so one aspect of transparency is have open software and hardware, where we actually avoid this problem of backdoors, of hiding weaknesses and 0 days, or having systems with flaws which we can't actually patch. So I think it's not a miracle solution, but I think if we want to have a more secure infrastructure, we should actually have open software and open hardware. Was my final message. So to wrap up this talk, thank you for your attention. So maybe my message was a bit pessimistic. So it seems that by moving to IoT, to big data and AI, we have many benefits, but also many risks. And if we don't do something, it's a bit like global warming. If we don't do something, it's actually going to get worse and worse, and we will end up maybe with a dystopian society. Just like for global warming, we can actually do things. It's possible to re-architect systems. It's possible to make sure systems reflect values like transparency and accountability for the powerful players, while privacy for the weak players, and to actually stop polluting with spreading all our data. Of course, we can do surveillance and governments can play their role, but they should be governed and controlled carefully. We should actually have an industrial policy, which means we should control industry because the big tech players have way too much power, but also some governments have way too much power. And it's a challenge for us citizens to get this power back. And a small part of this puzzle is some of the advanced cryptography and some of the open technologies. I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Preneel. It was as fantastic as usual, but it was also very informative. I know you might be tired, but I want to ask you a few questions if you have the time.
That's fine. That's okay.
So actually, what I was thinking during your talk, people believe conspiracy theories very easily, and they might believe a lot of things we find irrational. But all of the warnings you have made and the things you have talked, if they are more scared than most of the conspiracy theories, right? Because we know what are the main problems in the sector and so on. So do you think that we are able to raise awareness in this area? So as cryptographers or security experts, should we do more to let people know what is happening to their data and what they can be done, what they can do by themselves?
I think, yes, as scientists, we have a responsibility to try to talk to people and to also try to go out and talk to not only to technical people, but also to the broader audience. I think, on the other hand, of course, we have to understand that it's not cryptographers or scientists who will change the world. I mean, I don't want to make an analogy, but I think in global warming, we need to Greta Thunberg. I mean, somebody who is very visible and does this. I think in terms of, for example, regulation of big tech, it's clear now that Facebook somehow has seemed to have crossed the line, and that there is now an awareness with the general public that we should do something about this. So I think these slides are already, some of these slides are very old. I think our criticism of Facebook and big data did before the crisis, before people started actually getting upset at big tech and the abuse of power. But I think this is now part of the story. You now see lawyers publishing papers how to regulate big tech. So I'm not saying that this is my credit, not at all, but I do think as scientists we have a role to play. But I think the challenge is, of course, we should try to engage with the broader public, engage with journalists, and it's a story which has to be told many times. It's like a drop that you fall on a stone many, many times before actually you will make a small hole in it. I don't think you can convince people like this, but we have to repeat the message. And it seems that at least for some of these messages, of course, Snowden has been a very big impact because he made global impact. I think maybe what is missing in this whole message is there is an alternative. Right? So alternative is not only regulation, there is also a technology alternative. But the problem is to give it in the market, to give it a fair chance in the market, because it's, of course, impossible to go with technology against monopolists or against too powerful players. But I think the message we can as scientists give is there is an alternative. It's not the case that these systems have to be centralized, that we need all the data somewhere, or that you can only run a search engine if you do advertisement. It's actually possible to build things differently. And as scientists, we can show this, and I think this contact tracing app is an example, although I must be very honest, we had to get the help of Google and Apple to do it. Without them, it would have been very difficult. For example, because on an iPhone, you can't run Bluetooth in the background. But on the other hand, why should Apple decide that? Why can't the government say, look, this is a device of everybody, and we think you should be able to do this for this application? So it shows the power, but it also shows that it's possible to do, for example, contact tracing without creating a big database. And this is an example. There is many other things you can do like this.
Yes, that's a very good point, actually. So, but I also, see that the importance of privacy actually depends on the culture, I guess, because, for instance, in Turkey, I mean, when we talk in English, we always use security and privacy together. But in Turkey, we only use the word security because people don't care much about their privacy. So it makes the problem a little bit even harder because not each country or culture pay the same attention to their privacy or their problems, let's say. So thank you very much, Professor Preneel. It was wonderful to have you at our 25th anniversary. And actually, you have been to Turkey many times, and we were hoping to have you here again, but pandemic actually stopped us to have this. But we hope that in the future we can see you here again. And thanks again for accepting our invitation to be here.
I hope you come back someday to Metu for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your attention.
Once again, we thank all our speakers and all of the participants for joining us today in celebrating the 25th anniversary of our institute. We hope that you enjoyed the program and the inspiring talks. Our aim for the future is to continue with groundbreaking research and develop life-changing and life-enhancing solutions in the Informatics Institute. Now, before we close, we kindly ask you to open your webcams for a farewell photograph. We wish you all a good evening and hope to meet you again.